Grab a seat. Let's get started. To call the annual town meeting to order, my name is Jason Tallerman. I am your town moderator. I hereby declare that the warrant has been duly posted and published, and I hereby declare that the reading of the warrant be waived. We have a Pledge of Allegiance. If I could have the Troop 80 come up, lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Go Troop 80. I think
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
it's the White House.
Okay.
I know. I tried to send something to a friend and nothing happened.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. As is our custom and tradition, we take this time at town meeting to honor those who have passed, who have given service to the town. Peter O'Loughlin, who was the inspector of wires and was on the Mirror Lake Study Committee. John Oliveri, who was officer of Veterans Graves and a member of the Norfolk School Committee. Patricia Seeley Michelle, 125th Anniversary Committee and the Town Hill Committee. John Holmes, who was lieutenant in the Norfolk Police, sergeant, regular police officer, special police officer, all for the Norfolk Police Department. Computer Systems Committee, a member of the Board of Selectmen, member of the Board of Health Advisory Board, and a member of the Mass Growth and Development Commission. Harvard Nasuti, who was Board of Public Works. John Robbins, Board of Assessors, Earth Removal Advisory Committee, Special Police Officer, Rationing Board, Centennial Committee, Police Fire Station Building Committee, KP Social Studies teacher, KP football coach, KP hockey coach, KP Assistant Director of Vocational School, KP Director of Adult Evening Programs. Michael LaValle on the Recreation Commission and a fire and police dispatcher. Charles Manos, KP Regional School Superintendent, Norfolk Elementary School Superintendent, and Fran Holman, a library trustee and library study building committee. If we could all have a moment of silence. Thank you very much. Let me introduce some of the folks we have here with us today. Carol Green, town clerk to my immediate left. Jack Hathaway, town administrator. Todd Lindmark, finance director, that title. Jim Lehan and newly elected Kevin Calcutt. Welcome aboard, Kevin, on the Board of Selectmen. Town council Dave DeLuca to my far left. Below me, we have Steve McDonough and the rest of the advisory board who will be making a number of motions and recommendations. I'd like to recognize Jim Lehan, who has a few words for us here tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jack, can you put that slide up? Several years ago, we started a process of saying thank you to people that devote their time and talent to the benefit of the town. Towns such as ours and our form of government could not function without volunteers. We have almost as many volunteers as we do employees, and it's those volunteers that help make the town what we all hope it can and will be. We've tried to recognize some of the folks in the past that have given so much of their time and talent, and as you can see, we have 7 folks that we've recognized over the past few years. Tonight we want to recognize 2 more people whose plaques will be put up on this wall. The first is, as Jay mentioned, is a woman by the name of Fran Holman. Fran's passion was our library. That building would not be what you see there today in the centerpiece of our town if it were not for the devotion and passion of Fran Holman. She spent 40 years as a library trustee serving this community, devoted her life to that library, and we are very, very, very fortunate to have had the passion that she had. We will miss her. She passed away this past February. The second individual is Richard Connors. Richard served on a number of committees, but really Richard's passion was the senior center. 20 years ago, we didn't have a senior center in this town. Richard was one of the drivers. His passion, his enthusiasm is the reason we have that senior center today. And he devoted so much of his time and love to that senior center, and we're very grateful for his service as well. So if you would, please just let us join in our hands and applause, if you would, for these two wonderful people and all the time and talent they gave to our town. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Moderator, point of order.
Mr. Hathaway.
In my role as town administrator, excuse me, one of my charges is to point out errors when the selectmen make an error. That is on a rare occasion, I should say. Generally, I try to do it privately. Occasionally, it is at a selectmen's meeting, but really there's nobody there. It's with great honor that I can do it in front of so many people. However, Mr. Moderator, I would like to point out that while Mr. Lehan did an outstanding job making the presentations, he erred by omission. Stand over here for a little while.
I know that look.
Mr. Lehan presented two plaques to two very worthy recipients tonight, but I have very clear instructions from the board to honor three individuals this evening. It seems that Mr. Lehan was distracted at one meeting from a particular selectmen's meeting and did not hear Mr. Bugby and Mr. Palumbo make the decision to honor a third recipient. The third plaque is hard to read because the typeset is so small because there's so much on it. As you can probably guess, the third plaque is from Mr. Lehan. Many of you know all of you here know, at least now, that Mr. Lehan is a selectman. What you may not know is that he's entering his 15th year as a selectman, which is the longest tenure by any selectman in Norfolk's 148-year history. What fewer of you probably know is that prior to serving as a selectman, Jim served on the Norfolk Public School Committee, he served on the King Philip School Committee, he was on the H. Allday Building Committee, he still serves on the Public Safety Building Committee, he still serves on the Municipal Housing Trust since its inception until now, the Recreation Commission, the Personnel Committee, the Zoning Board of Appeals, and the Zoning Working Committee. We know Jim isn't done. He has at least one more year as a Board of Selectmen member. He's still on the Public Safety Building Committee. He still chairs the Municipal Housing Trust, and only recently just stepped down from the Recreation Commission for somebody who has 50 years less life experience than Jim. I know Jim has thoughts about how to continue to serve the town, and I suspect someday we will add on to this plaque. It would be helpful if we could print double-sided. A final thought before presenting this plaque to Jim, I just want to thank him for all of his service to the town. Not only for the service to the town boards, but he has an equally impressive resume of serving the Federated Church, as well as helping out youth sports, which I know he enjoyed when his children were younger, and in recent years, with the influx, some would say gaggle, of Lehan grandchildren flooding the public school system and now infiltrating the King Philip schools as well. All of this while managing to referee high school and college hockey for 50 years. So on behalf of the Board of Selectmen, James, and myself, I present this plaque to you and thank you for your service to the residents of Norfolk. I did have a picture of you getting ready for a selectmen's meeting.
It has been a privilege to serve you. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you very much. So a little bit on the rules for town meeting. We are governed by town meeting time and local bylaws. I believe the warrant that you received in the mail and that I believe there's copies of out there contains some general guidance and a glossary of terms. Along with others, will help explain procedures as needed and will recognize requests for points of order at any time. Motions are generally made by the advisory board, which sits in front of me, except for petition articles, which will be made by petitioners. We also have what we call motions for indefinite postponement. Those are when the original motion is for indefinite postponement. That is essentially to defeat an article. You will hear that a few times tonight. Those who make the motions will have the first opportunity to explain. Following that, there's generally an explanation from others in an official capacity. There will be some presentations tonight on important articles as well. Motions and motions to amend generally must be in writing, provided that for ministerial clerical corrections, I will accept friendly amendments, and we will also help with procedures and wording for any motions to amend. Carol Green to my left has forms and blank sheets for motions to amend, and we will help you put those to paper. We will have a hopefully robust debate tonight. I will try and balance debate as best I can between pros and cons. Everyone will have a chance to speak on a matter, but at a certain point, I may want to avoid repetition and will move debate along. Generally, there's a maximum of 5 minutes your first time to the mic and 3 minutes for the second time of the mic. If you're saying something that I believe warrants running over, I will let you run over. There's not an official time clock anywhere that someone's going to cut you off with. I may allow someone with new info to speak a third time, but by bylaw, I may limit a speaker to 2 times. All comments and questions must come through me. You cannot speak across to other people. And when you speak and come to mic, give your name and address at least the first time you speak. At our last town meeting, I was thrilled that we had a lot of debate. It was lively, it was colorful, it was diverse, and I think it was productive. I hope we continue to have spirited debate and that this meeting both supports and challenges the issues that are presented. However, I want to emphasize that there will be no personal comments, and all comments must be civil and respectful. I want to hear facts. I want to hear your opinions. What I don't want you to hear is you espousing someone else's opinion or denigrating someone else's opinion. We have a lot of local officials here, and between them and myself, we will try and get all your questions answered. When we vote, I will try and count on a voice vote, and if we can't, I may ask for a show of hands. And if I still can't determine the vote, I may ask you to stand and then be counted if necessary. We have tellers that are appointed for that. If you feel I got the count wrong for anything, 7 voters may stand and challenge it. I do respect a motion to call the question or to cut off debate, provided that anyone lined up at a mic may be given a chance to ask their question or make their comment. And if I think that that motion is too early or hasty and that there's still debate to be had, I will reject it. That said, there's a lot of business tonight, but I know we can complete it, and I expect that we can complete it tonight. So, getting right into the warrant, our first substantive article is, before we do that, there is a gray BMW plate 34762 outside. I believe that car is running. So, I think we're paying you, Jack, too much if that's your gray BMW. Okay, Article 2, Mr. McDonough.
Mr. Moderator, we'll try one more time. I move to indefinitely postpone Article 2.
Article 2 concerns payment of unpaid bills. I'm assuming that there are no unpaid bills.
That is correct. We have no unpaid bills.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. Okay, any discussion or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. It does pass unanimously. Mr. McDonough, Article 3.
Mr. Moderator, I move to approve the transfers as displayed on the screen and provided in the handout.
Mr. McDonough.
For our fiscal year 18, our transfers total $129,000, and these funds will be transferred from free cash, and that's $91,000, and the advisory board reserve fund, which is $38,000, and used for 4 categories, also shown on the screen. The fire department salaries have increased due to an injured firefighter and additional funds necessary for coverage. In addition, extra staffing was needed due to our Superfund 3 nor'easter storms. Building department salaries, there was an increase in inspections as well as updated software program purchased, which is going to assist quite a bit with our building permitting process. And the older software was no longer being supported by the vendor. For our facilities maintenance, we had additional electric charges due to reduced solar credits and increase in cost of electricity, along with some additional usage over the winter. And then the last category of the zoning board expenses, additional funds were requested by the zoning board relative to hiring a consultant for some additional expertise related to one of the ongoing 40B projects.
Any discussion or questions on this article? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? It does pass unanimously. Article 4, compensation schedule. Mr. McDonough.
Mr. Moderator, I move to approve Article 4 as printed in the warrant.
Mr. McDonough.
This is a 1.5% increase in the compensation schedule, and it pertains to a small number of town employees, approximately 10 people, who are not covered under a collective bargaining agreement or an individual contract. This is the same percentage increase that these employees have received in the past, recent past at least, to cover cost of living increases and including items like increasing health insurance costs.
Any questions, comments on article number 4? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. It passes unanimously. Okay, Article 5 is the omnibus budget. Let me just tell you how we're going to get at this. This is the town's general operating budget. We're going to read the motion. We're going to have presentations by Mr. Hathaway and by both Norfolk schools and King Philip schools. And then we are going to read the main items on the budget, and if you want to discuss them, we're going to hold them. If just yell out hold, and we'll go through that process, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss, debate, or amend any of those various holds, and that will be the process, and we'll explain it along the way. For the motion, Mr. McDonough. Hold on one sec. I think your mic is not on.
Test.
Here we go.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town fix the salary and compensation of the elected position of town clerk at $74,980.
You're off. Hold on one sec. I think they may be bringing you a substitute mic. You can, if there's another mic you want to use.
Got a green light.
I'm in stereo. All right, so Article 5. Mr. Moderator, I move that the town fix the salary and compensation of the elected position of town clerk at $74,980.08 as provided for by the Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 41, Section 108, for the fiscal year commencing July 1st, 2018. And further, to raise and appropriate the sum of $41,051,235 and an additional $100,000 from the town's stabilization fund to defray the department and incidental expenses of the town not otherwise provided for the fiscal year commencing on July 1st, 2018.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Hathaway.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I like to move. No, this is good. Thank you. So I'm going to try and answer some of your questions ahead of time. If, obviously, when, as Jay said, when we get to the point, we go through the budget line item by line item, you can ask questions, but I'll try and give you the overview. Our revenues for 2018 and 2019, you can see our tax base is rising from 28.5 million up to 29.8 million. That's property taxes and personal property on commercial businesses. Local receipts is building permits, anything we collect at town hall, different fees, and then state aid, obviously, is that's our cherry sheets, that's our Chapter 70 money, which is education funds. King Philip gets a separate allotment of Chapter 70 money, which is not included in that. But overall, you can see we're going from 36.3 million up to 37.9 million, which is an increase of 1.5 million. What this number does not include is the excluded debt. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes, but the excluded debt is for those projects that we've approved in the past, the library, the Freeman Kennedy School, King Philip projects, and the public safety buildings, and that makes up the difference between the 37 million and the 41 million. Our state aid laid out, this is not finalized yet. This is actually the governor's budget. The House budget is about $7,000 higher than this, so we got a little room to play with, but not much. And we took the more conservative approach because sometimes the charter school money has dropped at the Senate level. So school aid is up. You know, we get about $50 per student more each year. It's a little helpful. Our charter school money fluctuates quite a bit depending on enrollments. Lottery money, that used to be called general aid, but now that's the lottery funds. You can see we're getting a slight increase there. Exemptions, that's when our assessors have exemptions for personal property taxes. It's real estate taxes. That money is refunded. Some of that money comes back to us from the state a year later. And then the state land, it's known as pilot money, payment in lieu of taxes. So any land that the state owns, they don't pay taxes on, but they calculate a very reasonable number to give us in lieu of that. So it's the prison land mostly that makes up that money. So that number has rebounded a little bit, which has been nice. It used to be over close to 300,000. The assessments is money that is charged through our state aid. It's money that goes directly to the county, goes to pay for the agricultural school. And you can see that right now is going down a little bit, but in the House budget, that does tick back up. Available free cash, we talked about it in our transfers. So we have, in July, we had $1.5 million. This is money that is generated from not spending all of our budget money. If revenues come in higher than expected, obviously if they come in lower than expected, that would negatively impact this number, but it's generally expense budgets that aren't spent, revenues that come in better than expected, and then the prior year unspent free cash money. So this year we had $1.5 million. In the fall, we spent $90,000 on to two different departments. We put $250,000 into the stabilization fund. And we've done that a couple years in a row now. We did $200,000 a year before, and it was because we were at the low end of the King Philip budget the last 2 years. So we were able to put some money away for a rainy day, and as you'll see, we're getting to a rainy day pretty soon. And then in the fall, we had a number of capital projects where we spent $532,000. So as of the beginning of the night, we had $684,000. We've already spent $91,000 of that on the transfers, and what we are doing is proposing to spend $380,000 to support the FY19 budget, which at the end of the day would leave us $213,000. That sounds like pretty good news, except our snow and ice deficit is $180,000. We appropriated $250,000 last year. We put an additional $25,000 in the fall. We had $473,000 of expenses, so that leaves us about a $200,000 deficit. The $19,000 revolving fund is money that is generated when we go plow private property, sometimes it's King Philip, sometimes it's subdivisions that haven't been accepted yet, so they're private roads. The developers can ask us to plow their roads, and we charge them a per mile fee. So we'll be able to transfer $19,000 from those revenues in. So we'll have a $180,000 budget, deficit, excuse me. So what Todd has proposed, and I agree with, is that we cover that in the fall. We can carry that deficit to the fall, and when we have our new certified free cash, we'll be able to put that money towards covering that, and that would be that $200,000 that we're starting off with. We could close it tonight, but that would leave us with no free cash, and we don't, if there is some other emergency that we need to have money, that would be a good way to go get it if we had to call a special town meeting quickly. Our stabilization fund is $1.7 million. As I said, we put $250,000 in last year and $200,000 in the year before. We gained some interest as well this year. We have very safe security, so we don't generate a lot of income, but we did earn a little bit of money this year. So we're going to propose using $100,000 of that to support the budget. When we came to our conclusion about where we could, we go through all the departments and we figure out requests versus needs versus what we can afford. We include both school systems in that. Of course, we include Tri-County and the Norfolk Agricultural School as well. We got to the point where we ended up $100,000 short. We negotiated, really comes down to, always, the last piece of our budget is always King Philip because there's some negotiations between the three towns. So what we're proposing is to use $100,000 to support that King Philip budget from 4% up to the 5.2. Our major expense categories, you can see, and these are in your handouts as well. The elementary school will be at $12.2 million. It's a $432,000 increase. King Philip, a $429,000 increase to get them to almost $7 million. The police, health insurance, as I talk about health insurance, someday will be the third biggest department in town, but it's now the fourth. DPW operations, Norfolk County retirement, the fire and ambulance. There is a side story behind the fire and ambulance. We did pull out of some of the expenses from that budget that are related to running the ambulance operations. What we'd like to do is fund that in the fall. It's about $70,000. So it's money that's directly related to running the ambulance that we pull out of next year's ambulance receipts fund. So again, it's the users of the ambulance paying for running the ambulance. And I put that on the bottom for Todd's sake because we have a $4,000 cut in the municipal finance department. So thanks, Todd, for that. Where does our money go? So this isn't new money. This is our 2019 budget. What do we spend that money on? We spend 70.5% on education. We spend almost 17% on public safety, which includes police, fire and ambulance, animal control, and dispatch, and as we call it, communications. 6.7% on general government, which includes town administration, the town clerk, accounting, treasury, assessors, building, land use, recreation, library, and senior center. And 5.9% on DPW. We do spend $300,000 approximately of Chapter 90 money on the roads outside of that, but that's money that's coming from the town budget to run the highway, grounds, landfill, cemeteries, transfer station, and the mechanics. So our overall expenses are going up $2 million. Some of that is excluded debt. If you remove the excluded debt, we're going up $1.6 million, almost $1.6 million. The budget movers, again, this similar information, but trying to give you some history because I know these are probably ones that you're going to ask questions about in the packet. So I'll give you a minute if you want to look at that. I won't read all those numbers, but we have some jumps there. I'll go through each one of those. The town administrator, the Board of Selectmen budget, I have a 3.13% raise by contract next year. We've increased $3,600 last year to fund so that the affordable housing director could attend night meetings and communicate with the land use board so that we can make sure all of our affordable housing connections were being made. This year we'll be implementing that change for a full year, so that's an impact on that budget. And then we have the retirement of a long-term employee, and so we have to transition some training and probably a little bit of an overlap to cover for that, the loss of my Marion Harrington, where I know she's hiding here. Clear. Oh, she's right there. There she is. She's retiring after 70, no, 37, no, I don't know. 1973. Woo. We'll get our plaque someday. Town council, we increased our budget by $20,000. Obviously, the increased budget for the 40Bs. We expect to have some Southwood negotiations again, like we did a few years ago. Increase in public records requests. Our information technology, we have an increased need for licensing. We're starting to get audited more frequently. We've got to make sure we have all of our licenses in place for both the PCs and the servers. I apologize, I rock when I talk, so if anybody's getting seasick, just you can leave. And we have the online building, the software for the online building permits, which will all actually be going live on Monday. Mr. Bullock, thank you. And then will be rolled out to other departments as well, so you'll be able to do all of your permitting online from the comfort of your home. Facilities maintenance is obviously a big budget increase this year. We have increased custodial staff for the police station. We're obviously adding a new building this year. We will be getting some revenue back from the Metacomet Regional Dispatch Center, probably about $50,000 for rent, and then an additional $50,000 for provide services such as cleaning the room, cleaning their facility. Certainly increased utility cost for rising electricity rates and the new facility. We're putting solar on top of the new building. We're also putting carports with solar on top of it. As well, Matt talked about with the selectmen earlier today, we're also we're looking at solar options in a couple different places around town. We have an added deputy facilities manager. Matt oversees the facilities for both the school and the town, so will be 8 buildings. He's also spent an incredible amount of time working on managing the construction of the new building, and I can't tell you how many hours he puts in a day. I know Matt's hiding here someplace too. There's Matt. So we're going to have some assistance for him overseeing both the school and the municipal side. Town clerk elections, we have an additional election next year. We're also looking for the assistant town clerk, who's taken on a lot of additional responsibilities, including the public records czar. So he spends a lot of time organizing that material. The land use department, the land use boards asked for an additional 8 hours for the assistant who goes to all the zoning board meetings. So we're trying to fund that. As all of you know, I'm sure we have a lot of 40Bs going on, as well as regular subdivisions these days. The building department, you saw the transfers. We have increased number of inspections. We have building is going on. We have not only more construction going on, but we have much more rigid building code, so there's more inspections to do. There's more types of inspections. The mechanicals, we had to hire a person a couple of years ago to take that on. It's a part-time person, but those numbers have been rising. And then finally, animal control. Many of you probably know Hillary. Many times she's the most popular person in town. But unfortunately, the deer have accidents at night too. So we've been having her work on comp time, and we really have reached the point where we legally need to pay her either overtime, or we're looking at promoting her into an exempt position, so eliminate the need for overtime. So that was I think I've covered some of the highlights, but I'm sure when we go through the budget, you'll have some more questions, and now I'll turn it over to Ingrid. Dr. Alardi, I should say.
Talking about Norfolk schools.
Oh, sorry. Jack, how do I get to my slide? Good evening, I'm Ingrid Alardi. I'm the Superintendent of the elementary schools in Norfolk. And tonight we have with us Paul Cochran, who is our school committee vice chair and the chair of the budget subcommittee. You want to wave? Also Jeffrey Curry, who is a member of our school committee and budget subcommittee. And Todd Hassett, who is our district business consultant. So to start, on behalf of the Norfolk School Committee, our administrative leadership team, our teachers, and our staff, I just want to start by saying and expressing our sincere appreciation to the town and the community for your continued support for education. And I don't just mean that from a financial perspective. We're very, very lucky in Norfolk. We have a large number of parents that are actively involved in our schools through volunteering either with the PTO or with our Parent Leaders Council. We also have a lot of community organizations, the Norfolk Lions, the NCL, that support us with grant funding for special projects and helping us provide civic learning opportunities for students. So we feel very, very fortunate to have such great support. For tonight, we have just a very brief budget overview presentation to share with you. And this is an abbreviated version of the presentation we did for the public hearing. If anyone's interested in the full presentation, it is available on our district website. So the driving factors in our district budget process, we always start with our district vision and our district mission. Oops, I'm sorry. The vision for the elementary schools is to teach, inspire, empower, and succeed. And our mission is to provide a safe, joyful, and challenging learning environment that meets the needs of our diverse students, and through school, family, and community partnerships to provide an education that inspires lifelong learners and cultivates caring and productive citizens of our ever-changing world. As far as our budget history, to go from year to year, just to carry forward the current existing staff to absorb changes in costs for expense line items, it typically takes the district about 3% just to level fund the budget. As you can see, during some of the early years, 2011, 2012, 2013, it was very difficult budget times for the town as well as across the state. So during those years, we had significant cuts to programming, to staffing, and to resources that we had available. We've been very, very fortunate for the past few years. The town has been able to support the budget request at about 4%. That has helped us to really add back and restore programs and positions, and I'll talk a little bit about that further in the budget presentation. Our average increase, our average budget increase is about 2.54% annually over that period of time. As I mentioned, during some of the years that we had difficult budget revenue projections, we also experienced significant decreases in state and federal grant funding. So at the elementary school level, from 2009 to now, we've lost about $446,000 in terms of federal funding and grants. And I know that KP will speak probably to the same situation. The state eliminated grant funding for our full-day kindergarten. We've had an increase in unfunded state mandates, the adoption of new curriculum content standards, required professional development, increased demands for state data reporting and collection, as well as the McKinney-Vento transportation, providing transportation for students that are homeless. And we've also had significant costs, as you're probably all aware, to make our schools safe and secure environments. We've had to make some upgrades to our security systems to ensure that students are safe at school. The impact of the declining revenues, we had during those years of 2009 to 2013, significant cuts to classroom teaching positions. We've eliminated a lot of our instructional support staff, the health education program, technology staff. So a lot of cuts were made. As I said, for the last several years, the town has been able to fund the elementary schools with about a 4% increase annually. So we have been able to partially restore those teaching positions. We have fully restored our instructional support staff. We have not yet been able to bring back the foreign language program, which I know is an interest of the community. It's something that we're looking at. We're not able to do it in this budget cycle, but we are looking at technology and other options. We have partially restored our health education program. We have partially restored technology staff. We have restored funding for new curriculum materials that are fully aligned with the new state frameworks. We have been able to eliminate transportation fees and fees for the full-day kindergarten program. and we've also partially restored our library staffing. Per pupil spending in Norfolk, as you can see, the blue line is our Norfolk average per pupil cost. The red line is the state average. So we were significantly under back in 2011. We were significantly under the average per pupil spending. We worked really hard between 2011 to 2015 to try to close that gap. In 2015, we were right about at the state average. You'll see it drop down a little bit between 16 and 17, and part of what that reflects is that we've actually had an increase of enrollment. So we have about 65 more students that are factored into that calculation this year. We do have a series of comparative communities that the Department of Ed identifies. These are also other regional school districts. If you look at comparisons, you'll see that Norfolk typically is in the bottom quartile for per pupil cost. So in 2016, our average per pupil cost was $15,193, compared to other communities like Lincoln and Concord, up closer to $20,000. I think that the community can be proud that we see a significant return on investment. So while we have a lower than average per pupil spending, the Norfolk elementary schools are in the top 9% on the state MCAS tests and measures of achievement. Our class sizes in Norfolk are lower than average, with a lower than average student to teacher ratio. We still have outstanding arts education programs for music, visual arts, chorus, and we still have an award-winning band program. We do have physical education and health education twice a week. The majority of our teachers in Norfolk do have advanced degrees and more than 10 years teaching experience, and we have a very low turnover of staff. We also have wonderful facilities, as Jack pointed out. We have a facilities director, Matt Hafner, who makes sure that our schools are safe and clean. So we have great resources. What we're presenting to you, I think, is a very fiscally conservative budget. Every year, we know that the town has budget challenges. We work really hard to look for opportunities for savings. As Jack mentioned earlier, we have a shared facilities director position between the schools and towns. Next year, we're looking to add a deputy assistant facilities director, and we will be cost sharing that position. We also cost share some custodial and HVAC maintenance positions, so we're realizing through that shared services about a $60,000 annual savings. We also, we have been working with the other member districts, Rentham, Plainville, and King Philip, and with our special education collaborative. So we're cost sharing some professional development costs, which is realizing about $10,000 of savings annually. We continue to work on expanding our in-district specialized special education programs. Next year, that will realize us a savings of about $268,000. We continue to explore opportunities for sharing services with both Rentham and Plainville to help us reduce and manage costs. And we have been taking on more internal capacity to provide home-based services to students that have specialized needs, and that saves us about $15,000 annually. So our proposed budget request for next year reflects an increase of 3.65%, $432,000 and change. This budget request allows us to meet all of our contractual obligations for salary increases. It will allow the district to add a part-time speech and language pathologist, and that position is really to provide specialized services to incoming preschool students in one of our highly specialized programs. We're looking to add a .5 therapeutic teacher to the Freeman Kennedy School, and that's to meet the needs of a growing population of students that have social, emotional, and behavioral health challenges. And we also, one of the largest growing populations that we have in Norfolk right now is our English language learners. That population has quadrupled over the last few years. We're looking to add a part-time paraprofessional staff member so that we're able to provide the required mandated services in English language instruction. So our recommended budget, we will have 1.6 teacher retirements next year, which will be a savings of about $56,000. We are making reductions to clerical staff. And again, when I said in the beginning, we really look at our budget decisions based on our mission and our vision. We did have to make reductions this year. We tried to do it in a way that would have the least impact on students and that we would get the maximum return for our children. So we're reducing clerical staff at the Freeman Kennedy School, which will be about 8,500. And we're eliminating, we only have a 0.2 clerical staff in the central office that supports the business office and the HR office. That position's being eliminated. We have 2 paraprofessional staff members that we will be reducing for $40,000 of savings. We're reducing supply accounts at H. Olive Day by 6,900, by 540 at Freeman Kennedy, 2,000 from administration. We're reducing professional development funding by 12,500. We've reduced our curriculum adoption line by about 45,000. Heating and fuel, we're expecting some savings, so we're reducing that by 8,500. And we are eliminating a line we had to recommission the HVAC systems at the H. Olive Day School. We have a major roof project that we're hoping to do, so we're going to be delaying that work. Budget additions are minimal. We have, it'll cost us $297,000 and change just to meet the step lane changes and contractual obligations for our professional staff. For our non-contract staff, we budgeted a 2% cost of living increase. That's about $95,000. Again, the 0.4 speech and language position is $24,000 and change. 0.5 therapeutic teacher, $31,000. We're looking to increase a current occupational therapist by 0.1, again, to meet the needs of some of our special education students, and the 0.5 ELL paraprofessional at $10,000 and change. On the expense side, we are adding a salary step to our paraprofessional contract. We have done a lot of research. We're very competitive at the early hiring levels, but we have a lot of staff members that have been with us for many, many years, and most districts, the salary scale has 7 or 8 steps, and we're not competitive. We only have 5, so we're looking to retain our highly qualified staff that we put a lot of time into training and have a commitment to the district. So that cost is $6,800. We are looking to increase instructional services and supplies by $32,000. Special education tuitions will be up next year by $96,000, and correspondingly transportation costs for those students is up by about $20,000. We have an additional $11,000 for IT software and licenses to maintain our network and some of our programs. Small increase in nursing and health supplies of $200. Our general transportation contract, we're in a new 3-year contract. We just bid that out this year. The cost of the increase is $9,600, and we do expect about a $3,900 increase in facilities and maintenance. The overall budget increase breakdown, so of that 3.65% increase, 2.83% of that is driven by contracts. We have about 0.09% is enrollment driven. 1.53% of the increase in cost is attributed to special education increases, and we have net reductions of about 0.8. So that nets at 3.65% overall increase. Our class size projections next year, as I mentioned earlier, we have seen an increase in enrollment. Our class sizes are increasing slightly. We had an average about a couple of years ago of a class size of about 18. You can see our class sizes next year will range from 18.5 to 23. Comparison, again, as I said, in 2014-15 and 15-16, our average class size was 18. Next year it's going to be closer to 21. So we're moving more towards the middle of the pack in terms of our comparison communities. The overall breakdown, 67% of the overall budget for the elementary schools is dedicated to supporting professional salaries. 4% is clerical salaries. Another 14% is other salaries, so food service, custodial, maintenance salaries. 8% is contracted services. The bulk of that is our transportation contract. The 4% goes to supplies, 1% is other expenses, so those are generally contract requirements, sick leave, buyback, things like that for retirements. And then we have only 2% that goes to specialized tuitions, out-of-district tuitions. Just to give a sense, again, as I said, I think we're bringing forward a very fiscally conservative, responsible budget. There are things that the schools need that we have not included in our budget request. We are going to eventually need to increase art, music, and physical education teaching positions to accommodate the increased enrollment and the additional classes that we have. We really probably will need to increase that paraprofessional for ELL services to a full-time position. We're only asking for half a 0.5 position next year. We'd like to restore some of our paraprofessional staff that we are reducing in this budget request, as well as the clerical staff. We're reducing a 0.2 team chair administrator position. We have talked a lot about wanting to restructure and enrich our library program and look at bringing back the world language program. So those are things that are unfunded. On the expense side, we'd like to upgrade the video surveillance systems that we have in both schools. We would like to get to a point where we can eliminate band fees and not be charging for the band program. And we have some technology needs that we're going to delay for another future budget cycle. And next, I think KP is up.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Liz Zielinski. I am the superintendent of King Philip Regional Schools. I'd like to introduce Larry Azar. He is our new business manager in operations. We do have Jim Killian, a member of our school committee here, Mike G., who is chair of our school committee and a Norfolk resident, and we have our superintendent-elect, who is here also tonight. So I wanted to first thank everyone. It has been a pleasure serving the students of King Philip. I've been here for 8 years, and I am moving on to another district come July 1. And so this will be my last budget presentation for you. Yay. No. So we've done a tremendous amount of work on this year's budget. As you know, we took quite a lot of cuts last year, and there have been further reductions this year. But I wanted to go through it, and I'm going to turn over the business side to Larry, so he'll go into those nitty-gritty details, but it won't be that long. Okay. So the first piece you need to be aware of is our budget process. The school committee adopts a set of budget goals very early on. We begin our budget in September because of the 3 towns that we serve. We have to have our budget really in shape by our contract and by our by the agreement that we have early on. So we determine projected revenue early on in the onset. Again, this is where we're projecting without any numbers coming in from the governor or the House or the state and even the towns, because you don't have your numbers yet. We then go forward and look at calculating a level service budget. So what we have this year is what we project we want to have for next year. No real add-ons or any bells and whistles, so that we have sort of a beginning or a baseline to begin with on a level service budget. We then identify and prioritize our enhancements. We do want people to know what we like to improve with and move on with, which is sometimes fiscally possible and sometimes not. And then we calibrate and we adopt a budget. And the school committee met last night and did adopt a budget number last evening. So our challenge is to provide for your students the very best possible education that we can offer, maximizing our resources. And we do understand the struggle that towns have in funding education, because education, good, high-quality education, is expensive. As Ingrid mentioned to you, on average, budget needs to go up at least 3% on their operating costs a year in order to meet that minimum level service. So you may have taken, when you came in, a gold or yellow one of these. There is more information here, but I just thought I would highlight some quick accomplishments that we have at King Philip. Almost, 84% of our students graduate and go on to a 4-year college. That does not include our students that go on to 2-year colleges or our students that go into the military and some go to work. But we are well above the state average with students who are going on to 4-year universities. Many of those universities are Ivy League schools. We were ranked 19th best bang for your buck of public high schools in Massachusetts. We were ranked number 106 out of 331 for best college prep high schools in Massachusetts. We were ranked 381 of best public high schools in the United States. A lot of things to be proud of. For the 7th consecutive year, we have made AP District Honor Roll, meaning our students take more AP exams and score higher on those AP exams than the vast majority of other schools across the country. We have been, for anyone who likes green and gold, we might have done pretty well in the football state championship, 2 back-to-back championships. And as you know, we have award-winning music, art, DECA, and student council, and there's a long list of those accomplishments in that flyer. So as far as our general state testing and performance, specifically on the state standardized tests, we typically score well above the state average, and we continue to make improvements. As you know, the state has recently changed the exam, or maybe you don't know that. So the test is being recalibrated. So the past year, it was sort of a stay put. So we'll be looking to see how we do on this year, which they've just finishing up taking the MCAS 2.0, and we'll see how that all comes out. I expect that we will typically do pretty well because we have in the past. And I'm going to turn over to Larry, who's going to talk the numbers.
Thank you, Dr. Liz, and thank you all for having me here. It's been a real pleasure working here for the last almost year. That, by the way, is my high school graduation photo. So, Dr. Liz handed over to me to talk about the fun stuff, the numbers. So, as she mentioned, the district last year, this time last year, passed a King Philip School budget that included a number of cuts, including over $900,000 in reductions to staff and programs and services and increased user fees. None of those things are in the budget that we're proposing here tonight. We're not asking to restore any of those things. We have literally, until last night, we had to make one small cut, but literally it is a level service budget to this year. So it's not level service to what it was 2 years ago before the cuts. Those cuts that were made last spring for this fiscal year are still going to be in place for next year. So that's the red there. It's all in your packet on the bottom of one of the pages. And just for you know, the green and gold are the same exact information. We just mixed it up because those are the 2 colors of the district. So if you took 2, you can put one back. And we'll use them at the next town meeting. But so we cut an assistant principal at the high school, we cut 3 teachers, we cut a technology staff member, we increased user fees by 15%, which made them even higher than all the other areas in all the other districts in the area. And we dipped into our reserve funds by $380,000. You heard Mr. Hathaway talk about the reserve funds for the town. The school district, because KP as a region is essentially our own municipality, we have our own reserve funds, and we dipped into them even more in the current year in the budget, and you'll see we're dipping into it even more for next year. So there is, up until last night, we did have a level service budget proposal, but as you heard earlier, the initial assessment for the town of Norfolk was an increase of 7.2, and as Dr. Liz said, we understand that the towns struggle financially, and we wanted to try to partner and work with them. And as I said last night, budgets are a negotiation. We have to work to do that. So back in the fall, the 3 member towns had indicated to us they'd like to keep their assessments to 3%. We tried to do that. As Dr. Liz said, our budget process was to estimate revenues. We had to estimate 3% way back in the fall before the governor's budget comes out in January, and then we really start get going. So you'll see that our total budget is only going to increase 2.65%. Now, part of the reason why the Norfolk assessment went up originally by 7.2 is because the enrollment. The regional budget is distributed partially based on how much enrollment is from each town. So you can see there on the bottom, the Norfolk enrollment from last year to this year went up by almost a full percentage point. Plainville went up half a percentage point, and obviously Rentham went down by 1.5 points. So when we get to the slide that shows the assessment, you're going to see why everybody's not at 3%. So here we have the 3 towns, and you can see there in the red, the total of the aggregate of the assessments went up 3.09%, which is $20,000 above the target we had of 3%. However, the way it's distributed, because of all the factors, the enrollment and the state formula for the minimum contributions, and we made some reductions last night, so now the Norfolk increase is 5.15. So we sort of we tried to meet in the middle between the 3% and the 7.2. Plainville is still over the target, needs to obviously rent them this year. As Jack said earlier, Norfolk had a couple of years where they were under. Now this year it's rent them. So the total budget's going up 2.65, but the assessments are going up 3.09. And that's because the assessments make up about 75% of our budget. The other 25% comes from the state. State aid right now is projected to go up 0.28%. That's not 28%. That's basically 1/4%. It's about $22,000 that the state aid is projected to go up right now. You've probably heard there's a lot of talk about the state not meeting its obligations on regional transportation. That's something that's unique to KP, not to the elementaries. Charter schools, we heard about that on the reimbursements, and circuit breaker for extraordinary special education costs that the state is to reimburse for. So the state has not been meeting any of those targets, some for many, many years. The shortfall for KP is $400,000 for next year. Well, for this year and next year projected. If the state was meeting its obligations on the funding levels that it had committed to, we wouldn't be having this discussion. We'd stand up, we'd go, thank you for your support, and we'd go back and sit down. But because the state's not doing it, every dollar that the state doesn't fund is either a dollar we have to cut out of the budget, or it's an extra dollar we have to come and ask you for. And we hate to do that, but we have to try to run a school system. On the capital assessments, again, as was said earlier, these are the exempt debt. These are for the bonds on the middle school and high school projects, as well as the turf field. Next year is the last year of the turf field payment, so this will come down the year after that. And again, you see the variances. Norfolk, the reason they're all going down is because the interest payments go down as the years go on. And again, Norfolk has the smallest decrease because they have the biggest increase on the other side. So it's the inverse there. And that's another selfie up there as well. And last, we'll wrap it. Ingrid talked about some spending comparisons. We have some as well. So KP is unique because we are a regional school district that has only a middle school and a high school. There are only 12 other districts like that in the entire state that have only a middle school and a high school. And most of them are in central and western Massachusetts. It's rare for this part of the state, for eastern Mass to have them. So our per pupil spending is less than 11 of those 12 districts. And if you look at just the administration costs, because that's one of the things people like to say is, oh, you have all those high-priced administrators, myself included. But KP's costs are 25% below the average of that group. So I think we're doing pretty well in that area. Again, we spend $1,200 less per pupil than the state average, and more than 15% less than the state average on administration. And lastly, the average school district in the state spends more than 20% above its net school spending requirement. Net school spending requirement is, if you've heard of the foundation budget, it's what the state determines through a whole bunch of convoluted formulas on what you should be spending on public education. The fact that the entire state as an average spends 20% more than that should tell you that that formula is insufficient. But the state spends 20% above it. KP is spending less than 13% above that number. So I think we're being fiscally responsible there as well. And I don't know if this is the question time or not, so we'll leave that and handle on. Thank you very much.
Mr. G?
Yeah, Mr. Moderator. Thanks for indulging me for a moment. Mike G., 9 Mohegan Street, King Philip School Committee. I just wanted to take a moment. Dr. Liz did mention that this is her last meeting in Norfolk after 8 years, and 8 superintendent years is like 50 years, right? So through thick and thin, she's put the students in the district first, and I just wanted to recognize that. The accomplishments you saw on the green and yellow sheets on the board have happened under her watch. So it's kind of a thankless job to be a superintendent, especially the KP superintendent. And I just wanted to say, as a citizen of Norfolk, thank you very much and for your service. So.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, so now we're going to go through the budget. It's up on the board. There's a handout too that was available in the hallway. It starts on page 9, what you're seeing up on the screen. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to read the major departments, not the amounts. If you want to hold that whole line item or any sub-line item of it, just say hold when I say that amount, when I say that department, and we'll come back and we'll talk about each one of those. If you don't have any comments on those, then we'll move on, and we're only going to be debating the ones that you hold. So if you have a question or a comment, please say hold, and Carol and I will make a note of it, and we will come back to you. So here we go. Selectmen, Town Administrator. Advisory. Hold on advisory. Municipal Finance. Board of Assessors. Town Council. Human Resources. Information Technology. Tax Title Foreclosure. Facilities Management. Town Clerk, which includes elections and voter registration. Wetlands. Planning Board. Land Use Department. Town Reports. That does it for general government. Moving to public safety. Police. Fire and ambulance. Hold on fire and ambulance. Ambulance billing. Building Department. Weights and measures. Emergency management. Animal inspector. Animal control. Fire police communications. That's communications, Jack? That does it for public safety. Moving on to education. Norfolk Elementary. Hold on Norfolk Elementary. King Philip. Hold on King Philip. Norfolk Aggie. Tri-County. Moving to Public Works. DPW Administration. Highway. Vehicle Maintenance. Grounds Municipal. Ground Cemetery. Custodian of Veterans Graves. Road Program. Landfill. Snow and Ice. Street Lighting. Street Lighting. Hold. Town Vehicle Fuel. Transfer Station. Board of Health. Special Programs. Council on Aging. Hold on Council on Aging. Veteran Services. Library. Recreation. Historical Commission. Memorial Day. Hold on Memorial Day. And debt service. Okay. Going back to the beginning, we had a hold on advisory.
I'm John Nuhibian from 3 Knoll Drive. For advisory board, I'd just like to know, Mr. Moderator, what we're putting less into the reserve fund this year than last year. May we know what the balance is in the reserve fund, and is there any anticipated expense? For example, could we use the reserve fund for the snow removal budget from last year, for example?
I believe there was a transfer out of reserve fund for some appropriations. Anyone have the amount that's in the reserve fund? Mr. Lindmark. Or Mr. Hathaway. Passing the buck to you, Jack. Yeah, you tried.
So I believe the balance was $37,000. So we had 75,000. We spent 38,000 tonight. So we had 75,000, we spent 38,000 tonight, so we have 37,000 left. We don't anticipate anything to spend on that between now and the end of June. That will go into our free cash number and be able to be used in the fall to cover the snow and ice deficit. I had something really smart I was going to say too, but I forget what it is.
Well, the follow-up is, why then are we, if we have that little in there, why are we only putting 50,000 in instead of the 75? That I think we've done that for a few years.
We have. At least this past year, we put in 50,000, and then we transferred when we got free cash certified in the fall, we put another $25,000 in there. So I think the plan is to do that same method.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Moving on, fire and ambulance, I believe, was our second hold.
Hi, Thomas Kleiner here from 253 Main Street. I have a really quick question. There's really like two ambulances in the town. One's like a 2016 Ford F550 Lifeline 4x4 ambulance. That's Rescue 1. The other is Rescue 2. That's getting up to be like, that's like a 2011. That's getting up to be 7 years old. Is there any question about if they're going to place that ambulance? Because the old white one was gone like 7 years ago.
I don't know who wants to answer Thomas's question, either Jack or Chief Bushnell, one or the other.
I'll give them the short answer, and if there's more. So there is a plan for tonight on Article 9 to replace the older ambulance. And you obviously know the details better than I do. But
I'm a Google expert.
yes, you are. So we are replacing that older vehicle and trading it in. And we're asking for $295,000 to replace that older vehicle.
And the tank truck, because that's 29 years old, the old tank truck, tank 1.
There is no plan to replace that yet. It is still working, it's functioning. We not only look at our vehicles, but we also negotiate with the towns around us, and we're trying to buy smart regionally. So we know where our tank truck is and where it is, and we also try and make sure that the towns around us have tank trucks and ladders and all the other specialized equipment. So we're trying to buy smartly, regionally.
Yeah, because I seen a new tank truck one time. And the two squad trucks, one's a 96 Ford Squad 4 and the 07 is Squad 1. So are those squad trucks going to be replaced too?
No other trucks this year. The only truck we're looking to replace right now is the ambulance. The other ones we have on a list. We have a great set of mechanics down at the DPW who take care of them. And both the fire chief, who's very thorough in his work, and the mechanics are excellent. That they'll come tell us, keep us updated year to year what needs to be replaced.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you, sir.
Next hold was Norfolk Elementary.
Sorry, that was just me again. So I have a really quick question about Norfolk Elementary. Back in September of 2012, which was almost 6 years, they started school after Labor Day, but this year is not. The real problem is we haven't started school after Labor Day since 2015. It's 2018, and what's going to be the problem of that issue in the future? Because we haven't started after Labor Day since 2015. And September falls on a Saturday this year since 2012. I'm just asking, will we ever start after Labor Day? And a second for the HR day because the building's so small and old, running out of classrooms.
Do we have an answer for that?
Thank you for the question. For the past several years, we have started before Labor Day, partially because we have had an increased number of snow cancellations, and the Department of Ed in Massachusetts has encouraged districts to start earlier because it's really hard the later you get into June with the higher temperatures and climate to continue to have productive educational programming going on.
And the second level of HR day, this building's like 24 years old now. It has a second floor, the gym in the back, they're running out of space.
We are running out of space. That is something that's actually in our other budget, the full budget presentation, with the building projects, that we are out of classroom space at a child a day. We've been working with the town and a space study committee to look at possible solutions to, for us to be able to absorb some of the increasing enrollment, possibly in addition on the Freeman Kennedy, but we're still in the exploration stages.
Okay, thank you, because usually KP always starts after Labor Day, which is good. Thank you.
They do. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Mr. Rosenberg on Norfolk Schools?
Yes, David Rosenberg, 123 North Street. The presentation included an item for software and licensing, and I was hoping for an explanation of exactly what that is.
Okay, so we have quite a bit of different software programs. Our teacher evaluation program is a software-based program. We also have a new program we brought in for managing and protecting antivirus software, and also for monitoring student use of equipment during school day, called Go Guardian, so that we can be confident that we can monitor what sites students are visiting. So there's a lot of different software, and there's an increase in cost for all of those different programs.
A
Follow-up?
Yeah. So on the monitoring student use, is that basically seeing which websites they're going to or what programs they're using?
The Go Guardian program that we are using, yes, teachers would have on their laptops, when students are using Chromebooks, the teacher can see any sites that students are working on independently, and alerts come up if students try to access a site that would be restricted.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Question, Norfolk Schools?
Is this working? Yes. Ed Haddad, 138 Red Maple Run. Mr. Moderator, the question I have is about the new positions that are being requested. I guess my question is how many students are participating in those programs, and how are those programs managed now if you don't have teachers? So how are they being done currently in this current year?
Okay. So we are looking to add 3 part-time positions. It's a .4 speech and language therapist. We have a speech and language therapist at the lower school, but we take students into the elementary at the time of their 3rd birthday, into our preschool. We have an increasing number of students coming in with significant communication disabilities, which requires more intensive speech services than they're receiving now. So our current speech therapist schedules, they don't have the capacity to absorb any more students on their caseload. So that's to meet required IEP timelines. The ELL position, as I mentioned earlier, our population of students with English that are coming in as English language learners, 4 years ago, we didn't have any students. We're up to about 29 students. The state has required times of instruction that you have to provide in English for those students, depending on their proficiency level. We have a full-time English language learner teacher right now. She cannot meet the needs of all those students, so we need to bring in a paraprofessional staff member for that. So those are 2 of the new positions. We're looking to increase our OT position just by .1, which is a half a day a week, and again, it's to meet the needs of students coming in.
So
they're existing students.
So they're existing programs already, and you have teachers. It's just that the capacity.
Right, the capacity is stretched.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My question is, one of the things I missed, I think, was I didn't see a trend of enrollment, and that would be really interesting to see over the last 5 years, for example. What does the enrollment look like in the school? I think you could maybe get back to it by some of the other numbers, but, and I think I heard there was an increase in 65 students. I don't know what estimates have been made for students coming in during the year based on all the building that's going on in town.
That's a great question. When you came in, I think our budget document is available up front. The last page of the budget document shows enrollment projections and trends, so it is in there. But you're right, over the last few years, we've seen an increase of about 65 students. We just recently had a independent enrollment projection study commissioned, and that is to look at the potential impact on the schools of new enrollment based on the 40B projects. We had 2 independent studies done, one by Flansburgh Architects and one by NESDEC. And the projections right now of all the current pending 40B projects that the town has right now move forward, the projection is that we will see an increase of up to 250 students over the next 5 years. So that's, again, where we have a space study committee. There's more information about that in the full budget presentation on our website. if anybody's interested in looking at those numbers. You're very welcome.
Great question. Moving on, I see no one else at the mics. King Philip. Questions?
Actually had the same question for King Philip.
Let's see if we can get it answered.
For King Philip, the enrollment has pretty much remained the same throughout the years. It bumps up a little bit. 2 years ago, we had two very large classes, 400 and 425, which is quite large for us. But those have gone out. They've already graduated, so we're running about the same. And there are some budget projections with the housing coming in, but a lot of it depends on the families coming in and whether they have the little ones or the big ones. So.
Thank you. Anything else on King Philip? Question from the back there. Take your time.
Anton Pritchard at 52 Needham Street. I'm just sort of curious. I get the impression that there's anticipated a considerable amount of growth within students within the town of Norfolk. And I'm wondering, you may not know this, but do you have any sort of feedback, because it's going to ripple through for you, to the other towns in the King Philip region? Are they anticipating this type of growth as well? And what will the impact be on King Philip if you know that this is going to be happening?
In general, like most communities in the state, there has been a decrease in number of students. Just in general, it's going a little lower. Norfolk is seeing some growth, but the towns, if you remember the budget presentation, where Rentham is much lower because there's a decrease in the number of students. So we remain, even though Norfolk may be going up, we generally remain the same and flat because the other districts are not growing as much.
Thank you. Anything else on King Philip? Seeing nothing. I believe our next hold was street lighting. Thomas?
Hi, it's just me again. Street lighting by the corner of the intersection, like near the person heading towards Walpole. Not Seacon. Clark and Main. There's no street lights there. It's really dangerous, hard to see at night. And the road is so dark, as you can barely see going through the prison near Walpole. The flashing lights there, and there's like it's hard to see at night, especially the vehicles go by for emergency. It's just like any street line they can put there. It's really dangerous at night, and even though there's animals like deer around the road at night.
Mr. McGee?
Tom, how you doing? Good to see you. That's pretty...
My good old friend.
Yeah, we are friends, that's true. We meet every year and discuss roads. So this is a tough one. That's a pretty detailed question. It's, I think you're talking about one light.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
just a little bit of education is that as we build subdivisions, as you know, there are no more overhead conduits and then the street lights are fed underneath. But some of these street lights that are hung from telephone poles, the bulbs can go out, or there may be just a need for an additional light there. And what I can do is I can call Eversource and have that installed. I'll take a peek at that one, Tom.
Okay, thank you very much.
You bet.
Thanks, Tom. Council on Aging. No, I really need you to come to the mic.
I was just interested in why the 5% decrease. It looks like the expense, the salary number went down significantly.
Jack or Todd or?
Yes, with respect to the salaries for Council on Aging, we had a reduction on the bus driver services being reduced. and as well as the outreach worker position. We're probably going to fill that, not immediately, but at some point next year. So we'll probably look for a transfer maybe in the fall for that.
Thank you, Todd. Anything else on Council on Aging? Seeing none. Memorial Day.
Hi.
Hi. Your name and where you live?
I'm Chris Duke. I live in 16 Park Street. My question was about the percentage here. It actually changed from like 5.1 from Council on Aging to minus 9.1. What even happened there?
Looks like there's a reduction of $250. Mr. Hathaway, do you have an explanation?
Yeah, that budget was, I believe it was $750 a few years ago, and we bumped it up to $2,750, thinking that we were going to have some more functions going on. The last couple of years, we've spent a little over $1,000, so there was a little bit of surplus in there, so we're reducing it to $2,500. We still think that's more than we're going to spend. Encourage you to come down and get your ice cream, donuts, and cheese, I believe is the du jour of the day.
That was okay. I also noticed that the percentage was jumping all over the place on here. So it was kind of just a confusing thing that was on here.
Okay.
That's why I put a hold on there.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
All right, no problem.
Thank you, too, to Mr. Hathaway and to Norfolk and King Philip Schools for giving such a thorough presentation of those major budget items. That completes the holds, so we are ready to take a vote. Because there's some amount of stabilization money being used, it is a 2/3 vote. So, all those in favor of the budget as presented, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. It passes by the requisite 2/3. Thank you very much. Article 6, which is the Water Division budget by Mr. Sneed.
Mr. Moderator, I move to adopt the...
I think that we're having more microphone trouble. And Jack, I think you lost your screen here too.
Is it working? Still nothing?
I don't think it's amplifying. You can play musical mics all night.
Thank you. Is this better?
A little better. Speak right into it.
Mr. Moderator, I move to adopt the fiscal year 2019 Water Division budget in the amount of $1,543,977 as shown on the screen.
Seconded. It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Sneed.
The water budget is a separate budget that is funded purely by water revenues. The Norfolk town residents who use the town water pay their water bills, and that's where the money comes from for the Water Division. That money then in turn is spent on maintenance, exploration, and development of new wells for the town.
Any questions or discussion on the water budget? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. It passes unanimously. Article 7, Mr. Sneed, the Sewer Division budget.
Mr. Moderator, I move to adopt the fiscal year 2019 Public Works Sewer Division budget in the amount of $130,672 as shown on the screen.
Second. Mr. Sneed.
This is another separate budget from the main budget. It's the sewer system that's in the center of town that the town acquired a couple of years ago. Again, this is a situation where the users are paying for it. It's not town tax money that's going to this. And The expenses are for the maintenance of that small area, sewer requirements.
Any questions or discussion on Article 7? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. It passes unanimously. Article 8, the capital budget.
Mr. Moderator, I move to indefinitely postpone Article 8.
Second. Mr. Sneed.
Mr. Moderator, this is the capital item, and usually our practice in the past several years has been to postpone the acquisition of capital items unless there's an immediate need, because we wait to see what kind of money we're going to get from the state, how the budget shakes out here at this time of year, and in the fall we have a much better idea of what we can afford for capital acquisitions.
Any discussion or questions on the capital budget? Seeing none, all those in favor of indefinite postponement say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. It passes unanimously. Article 9, capital borrowing.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town appropriate $295,000 to pay costs of the purchasing and equipping of a new ambulance, including the payment of all costs incidental and related thereto, and that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the selectmen, is authorized to borrow said amount under and pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 44, Paragraph 71(1), or pursuant to any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town therefore. Any premium received upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any such premium applied to the payment of the cost of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of cost approved by this vote in accordance with General Laws, Chapter 44, Paragraph 20, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount.
Seconded. I'll just make a friendly amendment. That's Section 20, not Paragraph 20. So it's been moved and seconded. Mr. Sneed.
This, in much shorter language, is for the acquisition of an ambulance. For the earlier motion, we usually defer capital acquisitions, but this is a situation where it's felt that this is needed immediately. And the reason for borrowing is because the acquisition will be matched by the ambulance receipts, so that the payment of this over the period of the bond will be paid by the ambulance receipts, and that the lifespan of the ambulance will roughly match the duration of the bond.
Thank you, Mr. Sneed. Mr. Rosenberg.
Right. There's a reference to related technology equipment, and I'm curious as to what the related technology equipment is.
I think that, I don't know if Mr. Sneed, come on, Chief. I think you look like you're moving towards the mic. Ready for you. It's your time to shine, Chief.
We're watching though, Chief.
Good evening, everyone. How's everybody tonight? Watch say the Yankees are winning right now, by the way.
You can sit down now, Chief. That's enough. Thank you very much.
Seriously, though, the $30,000 that was allocated in there is a situation regarding the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Health. We've tried over the last few years to really circumvent a lot of some of the requirements that are coming out in terms of information that we are required by Mass General Law to share with the Department of Health. It's gotten to the point where they have now mandated it, because there are some outliers in the Commonwealth, Norfolk being one, of not being able to forward that information. And to do so, our server is outdated. Our IT people have come in and looked at it. They said that we cannot upgrade it, so we need to change the server. At the same time, our tough books, which the paramedics use to record information that goes to the hospital and also for billing, both the tough books in the ambulances themselves have developed problems, so we're going to be replacing those. Our IT people have been able to keep those running for us right now, but it ended up in a situation where we needed to move forward. As I said, we try to keep that in abeyance as much as possible, but unfortunately now the state has come down and said, you have to send us this information in a format that meets what our IT people will accept. So we're kind of bound by that, unfortunately.
Thanks, Chief. Any other questions? Ms. St. Aubin.
Patricia St. Aubin, 6 Shady Way. What is the life of the ambulance, please, since Mr. Steed said that the receipts were going to be paying for it? On average, what is that annually? And so how many years are we going to get those receipts back in the life of the ambulance, please?
Anyone with info on general lifespan of an ambulance? I don't know who might have that info.
Well, I'll give you the short answer, and then Chief can fill in the blank. So we run an ambulance 4 to 5 years as the frontline vehicle, and then we move it, as Thomas pointed out, we move it to the second, we move it into the back room, if you will, and it runs on secondary calls, which are getting more and more frequent. So we generally have an ambulance for 8 to 10 years, but we're trying to pay for that when it's in the front line, so it's in the 4 to 5 year range.
So over the course of 4 or 5 years, we're going to have receipts that add up to roughly $300,000?
We receive about $300,000 per year.
How much?
About $300,000. It varies greatly depending on the patients, but generally it's about $300,000 per year that we receive.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Any other questions, comments? Sir? Oh, and by the way, Chief, there's no checking scores while we're here in town meeting. If we could leave the cell phone in your pocket, that'd be great.
Ed 138 Red Maple Run. Is that 295, is that net of any trade-in or residual value of the old ambulance, or do you have to wait till Article 27 to pass before you can make a decision on selling it?
No, the $295,000 is the all-in price. That includes the trade-in of the ambulance that we currently going to be replacing.
Do you know how much that would be? What's it worth?
The net is going to be $261 for the ambulance, and then we have the software and the other additional costs, which adds up
What's the trade-in value of the old ambulance, just for information?
$10,000 to $15,000.
Thank you.
Question, comment?
A question, Mr. Moderator. I thought we usually paid for the ambulances out of the revolving fund. I'm confused. Did I miss something here?
I don't think you missed anything. I think this is borrowing, and I'm hearing that we're going to be paying for it out of receipts. Do the receipts come in through revolving, Jack?
They do. And we're going to borrow and then pay the debt out of the receipts. We have done ambulances many different ways. We've leased them. The last one we received a grant for from the Department of Corrections. I don't believe we've paid cash for one yet, at least not in my lifetime.
I guess my follow-up is, do we not have enough in the revolving fund right now to pay for the ambulance?
And we went over this for quite a while with the advisory board. I think it's hard to tell, projecting through the end of the year, but because we also use some money to fund the operating budget,
okay,
it would get us down to very close to zero if we paid directly out of that fund right now. So again, we'd like to, as we talked about with using the stabilization fund before, we'd rather not spend those right down to zero.
Right.
We'd like to keep some in reserves in case 2 years from now we need to fund another ambulance if there's a mechanical issue or a lot of growth.
And I'm not sure we actually run the ambulance receipts through a revolving fund anyway. It's a separate kind of fund, isn't it, Jack?
Yeah, it's a receipts reserved.
Right. So we'll be talking about our revolving funds in a few minutes, and it's not a classic revolving fund. It is separately accounted for, though.
Okay. And what's the term of the bond? May I ask that? Do we know?
Not determined yet, but we're anticipating 5 years.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are we all set on our ambulance borrowing? Seems as such. This is borrowing. It requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? It passes unanimously. Article 10, Capital for the Water Division. Mr. Hurwitz.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town appropriates $2.6 million, $2,600,000, to pay costs of various water system improvements, including, but not limited to, developing a new well located off of Holbrook Street, upgrading the water system's SCADA system, converting the Gold Street and Spruce Road facilities from treating water with sodium hydroxide to potassium hydroxide, and for the payment of all other costs incidental and related thereto, and that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the selectmen, is authorized to borrow said amount under and pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 7, Paragraph 1, or pursuant to any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town therefore. Any premium received upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any such premium apply to the payment of the costs of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of costs approved by this vote in accordance with General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 20, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount.
Seconded.
Thank you. Mr. Hurwitz.
All right, so in a little bit more English. Yep, sorry, little. I need to grow. All right. There's essentially three components to the proposed water projects. So the first is a new well, all of which combine to help sustain the level service and increase the water quality in town. The first is a new well located off Holbrook Street. The intent of the new well is to allow us to maintain the same level of water production because the two existing wells, due to aging, are going through decreasing output over time. Additionally, bringing the new well online will allow for redundancy in the event one of the wells does fail, as well as the future potential to increase output, which will help satisfy increasing demand. The second is the SCADA system upgrade. What a SCADA system is, it allows for water infrastructure, diagnostics, control, and infrastructure security. And our SCADA system is beyond its serviceable life and needs an upgrade. And then lastly, converting the water treatment from sodium hydroxide to potassium hydroxide. The conversion is intended to result in less caustic water, which is thereby reducing corrosion within the system, thereby increasing the life and reducing maintenance costs over time. So the request is to authorize borrowing of up to $2.6 million for the necessary engineering services, permitting, bidding, and construction for these projects.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Mr. Rosenberg.
Thank you. I appreciate the explanation of the acronym SCADA. I was hoping that you could explain in a little more detail exactly what that does or how it does it.
Mr. McGee?
David, how you doing? Bob McGee, Director of Public Works. Before I answer that, I'd just like to say welcome to Kevin, and congratulations to you, Jim. That was a good little award you received there. The SCADA system, better known as the SCADA system, is I think it stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition.
He actually gave the words for it.
What's going on with that is that's a small component of the borrowing that we're looking for. That probably comes down to about $50,000 in cost. And throughout the town, we have repeaters, like we'd have one up on Noon Hill. We have two more in two different locations. And what that does is the SCADA system allows us to just control water levels from in a remote location. It tells us when we can turn on pumps, turn off pumps. It's pretty much a nationwide system, and that's the technology that operates our water system.
Thank you.
You bet.
Mr. Bakanowski.
Andy Bakanowski, Naugatuck Avenue. There we go. Okay. In a previous life, I had 4 water operator licenses. If I can add just a friendly amendment, rather than upgrading the water SCADA system, it should be replacing. Bob, $50,000 is not going to cover it. I'm serious. I really think you're going to need a lot more. I don't know where you got your estimate from, but really, I mean, what I know in the 3 systems I've worked on the past 10 years, they were well over, and the systems were smaller than the towns. So.
Yep.
interrupt Mr. Not interrupt Mr. Bakunowski, I'd never do that.
It's okay.
So the SCADA system is actually, I think Bob was talking about either about the design or the KP system. So the SCADA system is a $470,000 upgrade.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
more in line with what I was
I
expecting.
said 50, I'm sorry about that.
So the well is $1,921,000. SCADA system is $470,000. Chemical conversion is $73,000. And then the KP system, which is this, as you, I know you know, but the communication system between the town and everybody's house, that's the $50,000 to $60,000 upgrade that Bob's talking about.
Okay.
That was the number anyway.
Okay. Sorry,
Sorry
Bob.
about that.
No, I just was
No
surprised.
problem, I was looking down, and Jack, thanks for the correction.
Okay. Okay. I'm good, thanks.
Thank you, Andy. Mr. Rosenberg.
Right, so I guess I'm unclear as to whether the explanation that we got for the SCADA system was really an explanation of the SCADA system or of the other system, and if it was of the other system, could I get an explanation of the SCADA system?
I think the explanation was the SCADA system. So the SCADA system allows the technicians, Mr. Finney's there in the back row trying to hide, but he can, from his phone, he can monitor the systems. He can turn on the pumps, shut off the pumps, check the tank levels. If there's a major issue, he's going to get notified, and that's what the SCADA system primarily does.
Question, sir.
Just a quick clarification, Mr. Moderator. Do I understand that the service on the debt would be paid by the water takers only? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Seeing no one at a mic, this requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. It passes unanimously. Article 11 is a petitioned article. Mr. Chipman, it is your petition. Before Mr. Chipman reads his motion here, I want to make clear this regards town hall hours. This is a non-binding article. The town meeting cannot compel the selectmen or Mr. Hathaway to keep the town hall open any specific number of hours. So for non-binding articles, I will take debate. We will take a vote as we would with anything else. It'd be a little less debate because there's nothing binding happening. It is just to ensure that we get the preference of the town meeting to the desk of the Board of Selectmen. Mr. Chipman, we are ready for you.
Thank you, Ms. Moderator. I make a motion to approve Article 11 as written.
There is no second. There is a second. Mr. Chipman, you want to explain your...
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. This article was brought with a petition of residents that it came up with a neighborhood conversation. Some who have actually supported it, some who were against it, yet signed the petition anyways, because they thought the process would be fair to hear it out in town meeting. Here's the concerns, is our existing schedule, which is not aimed at any town employee or otherwise, doesn't fit for many of the people that work outside of the local area. Many people are not even getting off a train before 6 or sometimes 7 o'clock at night. It was brought up, it was talked about. There was lots of concerns about this. They said, what can we do about this? Because of 25 years in town and having some involvement before, they pushed me into this. I started doing some research. A lot of the research that I pulled up was on this little pink sheet that I put forward to the town meeting for consideration tonight. As you can see, all of the towns that abut the town of Norfolk have 5-day-a-week schedules. They have 1-night-a-week schedules. These are something that I need for the town meeting to consider, mainly because it just doesn't fit. I find it interesting that you'll be looking at an Article 19 later tonight, and they're referencing the need to look at something that Rentham did in the past and has recently adopted, yet we have 6 other towns that touch us that seem to have a better working schedule for their residents. This is a democracy in its purest form. We're taking advantage of the idea of bringing this petition, and we want some fair debate on it. Nothing more, nothing yet less, nothing to compromise the people that work in the town hall that I've worked with for many years. Far from it. This is about the residents, where there are thousands of people in this town that may feel otherwise. That's all, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chipman. Any questions or comments? Ms. Jacobson.
Excuse me.
Sure.
Hi, Sue Jacobson, 46 Needham Street. I'd like to ask the petitioner how many people signed the petition.
I don't think, in fairness, he has a requisite number of petitioners. I don't think that that's particularly germane.
I have no problem answering that question.
I don't think it's necessary,
Okay.
Peter. Thank you. I appreciate the question, Sue. I just want to keep it on the four corners of what Mr. Chipman is proposing. Anyone else have any questions? What is, if I can get Finance Committee consideration of this, if you guys had a chance to take a vote, Mr. Hurwitz?
It's the advisory board's recommendation to IP indefinitely postpone this article. Essentially, we had reviewed this with a number of employees at Town Hall, including the HR director, and there's a number of benefits to the Monday to Thursday 9 to 6 schedule. First and foremost, it's used actually as a means to attract and retain talented people. It allows for flexible work schedules for some people to have family care or other jobs on a 3-day weekend, which is highly valued from the preponderance of employees that we have spoken to. But alternatively, on just the cost and expense side, if we were to maintain a level expense at running Town Hall, if we were to move to a 5-day-a-week schedule, it wouldn't increase the number of hours the Town Hall is actually open. In order to maintain level expense, it would be the same amount of hours spread over a longer period of time, which would actually reduce the number of hours that Town Hall is open on any given day. But secondly, even spreading out the hours over 5 days would also increase some infrastructure costs, building expense, heating, maintenance, those sorts of things. So it's the advisory committee's recommendation to keep the hours as is.
Thank you. Mr. Hathaway, do the selectmen have a recommendation on this?
I do.
Mr. Hathaway's recommendation.
This was, you know, I wish this process would go through and be addressed with, you know, the executive branch, if you will, of the town. This is a process that, you know, the selectmen ultimately decide when the town hall is open. There's lots of good debate to have. I'm not sure this is a very efficient way to have that debate. But having said that, you know, we went through a number of years of making changes. And before 2001, we were open 8 to 4 every day. From 2001 to 2005, we were open from Monday through Wednesday, 8 to 4, Thursdays 8 to 7, Fridays 8 to 1. From 2005 to 2007, we were open on Mondays and Wednesdays from 8 to 5, and Tuesdays and Thursdays from 8 to 7. And then in 2007, we made the change to 9 to 6, where we are today. And actually, it's 9 to 6 on the door, because the thought process back then was that the financial offices in particular needed an hour to prep the books, get the counters, you know, get the receipts ready, et cetera, and get the drawers ready. But we're actually open at 8 o'clock, probably 99% of the time. The building department is open sometimes as early as 6:30 or 7. You know, when we talked about it with the advisory board, there were a lot of stories from the employees about how, you know, if somebody calls and needs to get to us at 8 o'clock at night, we go out of our way to do that. We've had, Carol, I know, meets with people on Saturdays. During one of the snowstorms, she came in and met with somebody who came to Town Hall on a day when it snowed, but we reopened and she met with the person to talk about birth certificates. So we try and be as flexible as we can. And as Jonathan said, you know, if we go from the 8 to 6 and spread that out over 5 days, we're not going to be open until 6 o'clock every night. And we actually do think we get a lot of people off the train or out of work at late in the afternoon. And if we have to start closing back at 4 o'clock so that we can have some hours open on Friday, then that's going to hurt our ability to be open late in the afternoon or early evening. Finally, if we have employees on, don't tell the employees this, but if we have employees on a Friday, we actually have to give them another lunch break as well. So it's losing half an hour that we don't give them today. Again, we're open for suggestions. I don't really hear a lot of conversation about this. Back in the 2000s when we tried that 8 to 5 and 8 to 7, we got a lot of complaints about that because people would show up on one day, they thought we were open until 7 and they were mad that we closed at 5. That's one of the reasons why we went to the standard 4-day, 10-hour day, 4-day, 10-hour week. There are other reasons that we've talked about, and I would strongly recommend that we stay at 8 to 6. If somebody wants to come in and talk to the selectmen about making some changes, I'd say come in and make those suggestions. My one final thought is a lot of these departments that you see here, like if you look at Rentham and look at how many, even though Town Hall is open for 40 hours and they're open on Fridays, you look at when their land use boards are open and they're only open a couple of hours a day. So I think Norfolk does a great job in that our land use boards and all of our departments are open for 40 hours per week. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Jack. Mr. Rosenberg.
Thank you. I'm not advocating either in support of or in opposition to this, but I am advocating that there should be citizen engagement in making this decision. The town hall functions for the benefit of the citizens of Norfolk, at least it's supposed to. And I think that I would strongly recommend outreach to find out what the majority of the citizens actually want and would find more convenient. Thank you.
I hope to get some of that outreach and that opinion here tonight. Sir.
Yeah, Ralph Greggs, 6 Shady Way, Norfolk. Peter, I was one of those people that used to get off the train late every day, and Fridays was often about my only day where I could access Town Hall, and of course it was closed. So I guess my thought is that one of the notions is we don't necessarily need to spread the hours, but rather maybe consider time shifting some of the hours. I mean, it's a fairly typical practice for a lot of businesses where they don't open up until, say, 10 o'clock, and then they perhaps close at 8. I'm just kind of making up sort of some hours per se, but something that starts later and ends later. And then in addition to that, I don't think that it's necessary that every last department has to adhere to what might be customer service hours, because they don't necessarily, kind of deal with the customer day in, day out per se. But those that do and that we rely on maybe ought to think a little bit about being a little more flexible and responsive to the town citizens. So thanks for bringing it up, Peter. I mean, these things are always worth kicking around at a minimum. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ralph. Anyone else on this? Mr. Fronczak.
Arthur Fronczak, 14 Main Street. I have the opportunity at my job down in Back Bay to work 4 hours, 4 10-hour days, which I tried to do for a while, which is actually exhausting. Some of the data that's presented here, I appreciate the quantitative aspect of it, but I just hope people don't get the impression that folks are, I don't know, this sounds too severe, but like getting away with something. I mean, it's 40 hours, people are putting it in. Personally, just speaking for my experience, there's been a lot more services online, which I've appreciated that a lot better than trying to sort of mess with town hours. And I was just on the advisory board, very persuaded by this experiment being tried several times in the past. And when I look at this, I can appreciate there's one night a week for a lot of these towns where it's open until 7 or 8, but this really seems to be mostly about the Friday hours. And all the Friday hours here are half days anyway. I mean, when I get off work, I'm on my 5-hour days. If you're open for a couple hours on Friday, that doesn't really help me out. So again, I guess I'm just saying I really appreciate the push for more online services, which to me is much helpful than me trying to race home faster. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. Any other questions or comments on Article 11? Seeing none, this is a majority vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay? Nay. I believe. I was voting for a direction to the selectmen in support of changed hours. Thank you, Julie. So let's do that vote again. If you vote aye, you are supporting Mr. Chipman's motion, which is to direct the selectmen to consider the expanded hours. Let's try that again. All those in favor of Mr. Chipman's motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Nay. I think the nays have it. It is close. If 7 want to stand, then I'll count it, but I believe the nays have it. It is a close vote, and it's a good debate, and I think people should take Jack up on presenting it to the selectmen. All right, we are moving to Article 12, also a petition being presented by Mr. Chipman for amendment to our bylaws to add a recall bylaw. Mr. Chipman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I would like you to consider to vote approve Article 12 as written in the warrant.
Okay, and there is a bylaw printed in the warrant that explains the recall petition, which allows for recall of elected officials. Mr. Chipman, if you'd like to explain your motion.
I think that the ultimate check and balance system should exist on a town level as well as every other level of government. We've gone through a pretty interesting period, not only here, but also on a national basis, that this is something that I think everyone should consider always having the right to. I don't think this is necessarily a target, and by no means is it an easy poll. I note that the article itself notes 200 signatures. Well, when I walked in here tonight to discuss these articles, I took a count at 8:30. There were 159 voters here. We were spending $32 million, and we were considering, I have no idea, 25 articles.
How is that germane? I just want to stay on the recall bylaw.
The point being is this is not something that is a slam dunk, because we have the right to question our elected officials, and there are certain safeguards put into the actual recall petition to hopefully have people have to work at it if they were concerned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to go to the advisory committee to see if they have a recommendation. Mr. Fronczak.
First, a point of order, was the motion seconded?
I believe it was. Can I ask? Mr. Rosenberg, thank you.
I want to get the procedures out of the way. Okay, so Arthur Fronczak, Advisory Board. The petitioner was invited to attend a town meeting, to the Advisory Board meeting to discuss this. I know schedules prevented that. I like to hear pros and cons for the material that comes before us. We tried our best to sort of think this through. As you can see, it's 8 sections. We ended up voting to postpone this, our strong preference being that this go through like a bylaw committee. Article 19 tonight, I think, would be a great forum for something like this. I'm in agreement, just personally, that this is something that that would be helpful. Accountability and democracy is a wonderful thing. I just have a concern, and I think many of my colleagues on the advisory board did, about pros, cons, experience, where the language comes from. That should be more fully vetted. Thank you.
And Mr. Hathaway or the Board of Selectmen, do you have a recommendation or an opinion on this?
I do.
Mr. Hathaway.
I attended the advisory board discussion about this, and there was a lot of good discussion about if there were some additions to this, particularly if there was a consideration for if somebody had broken a law, committed a felony, some threshold that made it obvious that we wanted to remove them. If that was put in, would be something I would think a little harder about this. The other provision that was not in there was, a provision that would cause a delay between the election and when you could start the recall provision. I think that makes good sense, so that, you know, as somebody spoke at I think it was Jonathan at the advisory board meeting, you know, if somebody loses 700 to 500 in an election, that somebody can't go out the next day and get 500 votes to have a recall provision and start that whole election process over again. I think there should be a cooling down period in this, and there isn't one in this suggestion as proposed. On a higher level, I just think that at the local level, I would be really careful with a recall provision. I think elections are hard enough. I think this is a small town. It's hard for us to get people to run for boards. I don't think 3 years is really that long of a time to wait. If we need to, you know, a year from now, if I don't like one of the selectmen, a year from now I can vote somebody on who's going to battle that person for the next 2 years. And of course, in 3 years, I can elect somebody. Hopefully, I can elect somebody to replace that person. I think, again, I think it's hard enough. You know, people. I haven't run for office, but I think I hear what the battles that people go through and the scrutiny they go through. And talking to other town administrators where there's recall provisions, it just ratchets it up another whole level of personal vendettas, and it's not a good thing for a small town. So my recommendation is that we vote no on this article.
Thank you, Mr. Hathaway. Mr. Dooley.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sean Dooley, 11 Wright Farm Road. I would like to present an amendment to Article 12.
Okay, why don't you give us your amendment?
Okay, the amendment is to read, to insert after Section 7 to be Section 7A. This is kind of, it's a poor sport, you know, kind of what Mr. Hathaway was just speaking to, sport provision. No recall petition shall be filed against an officer within 90 days after he or she takes office, nor in the case of an officer subject to a recall election and not recalled, thereby shall not be subject to this recall provision for the remainder of their current term. And if I could speak to that following, but I obviously need a second first.
Second. We have a second. And your motion's in writing?
Yes.
Okay, does Ms. Green have it?
She does not. I just kind of did it.
Just kind of did it. Well done. Okay, so.
But I got my other notes on the back, so let me.
Okay, that's fine.
Can I lick it and rip it off and give it to her?
No, please.
Really classy.
No licking, Sean. No, not at town meeting. Yeah.
It's, you know, it's in honor of the Bruins. I mean, it's.
No.
You're not a hockey fan. Okay.
I am.
Can I speak to it now?
You may.
Okay, great. I'm personally in favor of a recall provision from the very standpoint of there are exceptional circumstances that we do have to worry about in this day and age. Whether it's someone being indicted for a heinous crime the day after they get elected, or as many people just, we just had an election for the town clerks, and one of the main components of wanting it to be appointed was they're like, what happens if we get someone that's horrible as a town clerk, and what if they don't do their job, and if they're elected, there's no way you can get rid of them. This provision actually allows for the town to say, all right, this person got elected and has moved out of town and is never showing up or doing a horrible job and is doing everything wrong. This gives us the ability to get this person out. And the sore loser provision, what it sets forth is that it remains with the 200, can't be done for 90 days, so there is a cooling off period, and it can only be done once during a person's term. So it can't be, we can't stifle our government by having these things being over and over and over and over again. If someone, if someone gets convicted of pedophilia, or we have the Attorney General from New York, becomes comes to town and all of a sudden gets elected, and all these issues come out. We as a town now are stuck with that person for 3 years as our town clerk, or on the planning board, or as one of our 3 selectmen. And we don't have any provision whatsoever. We can yell and we can scream, but that person can say, no, I'm not going to. So if 200 people got together and said, all right, let's put it to a ballot, then we can let the people decide. So I'm in favor of it, provided that we have this amendment on board to prevent a lot of the pettiness and political gamesmanship that surrounds some of these issues.
All right.
Thank you.
So, as to just the amendment, which is the cooling off period plus the limitation on the number. If you have a question just on that.
With all due respect to Mr. Dooley, I guess that the question is related to the amendment. Should we be crafting the language of such an important bylaw here in the middle of town meeting, or should we refer it to a bylaw study committee as was suggested? And I kind of like the latter idea. So.
Okay, so let me
So I'm
just-
speaking against
No,
the
I
amendment and
understand.
against the petition.
I'm going to just clue you into a little parliamentary item that you seem to be framing, and when we're done with this amendment and discussing it and voting on it, it is called referring for further study. That is a legitimate motion if you want to make, and sometimes town meetings make a motion to refer for further study and to report back at the ensuing annual town meeting. I'd like to handle Mr. Dooley's amendment rather than amending his amendment and getting into stacked up amendments, but that appears to be what you're suggesting.
Yes.
I'm not making that motion for you, but.
Sounded good.
Okay. Well,
Thank you.
Stay close to the mic then, and,
Okay.
and we'll see where it goes. Any other questions or comments on the amendment? Seeing none. So Mr. Dooley's amendment again is to have a 90-day waiting period, I believe, Mr. Dooley?
The town clerk now has it, so she can read it if she wants. It's a 90-day waiting period with a one chance of a recall provision.
Okay, I think we got that. So it's a majority vote on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
I think the ayes have it on the amendment by a narrow majority. So as amended, we now have a main motion on the floor, the bylaw, with Mr. Dooley's additional provision. Any further discussion, debate, or amendment?
A point of order, this isn't a bylaw change, this is a special act of the legislature.
Oh, is it? I'm sorry. It is a special act of the legislature. Thank you for that. It is still just a majority vote on that amendment. Thank you very much. Further questions?
Mr. Moderator, may I make a substitute motion?
You may.
May I make a substitute motion to refer this article for future study? Thank you.
That's a legitimate motion. So let me just check and see if that is a debatable motion. It is debatable. Does anyone want to speak or debate on the motion to refer? I'm seeing someone pointing to that. Can you come up to the mic? Thanks for that.
My name is Josephine Kardahi, and I live on 53 Seacon Street. The problem with that is, I may have a problem with that motion. Like, for example, the study that, we're going to have, to create the charter for the town, are those, is the study committee appointed by members of the Board of Selectmen? It all depends on who's doing the referring.
It can be, if referring for further study can be more specific or general. Generally, only the selectmen appoint those that would be appropriate. Sometimes people will refer to other committees or have the moderator do a study committee. Right now, it is just a blank motion to refer.
Okay, but that's just a point that I'm going to make, that it could possibly be in the hands of selectmen referring,
Right now, there is no definitive committee appointed or suggested by the motion.
Okay, I'm in favor of having, the voters mean something more than just the day of election. It could be just something put in place to keep everyone honest,
Thank you. Any other questions on the motion to refer? Mr. Rosenberg.
I'd be very interested in hearing the original petitioner's position with respect to the motion to refer.
Mr. Chipman, if you like, you don't have to.
No, that's fine. Thank you, David. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I have no problem with Mr. Dooley's modification for section 7, was it?
What about the motion to refer, I believe Mr. Rosenberg was asking about?
I think this is the forum of which we're here to debate consideration for our town, and we brought it forward like other duly formed petitioners, be them town administrators or other boards. So I'd prefer not to. I'm going to vote against his referral, but I have no problem with Mr. Dooley's inclusion of expanded language, for lack of a better term, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Chipman. Mr. Fronczak?
Arthur Franzak, 14 Main Street. Question for, I guess, Jack. Has this been reviewed by town council, the specific language of the 8 sections?
Yes, Mr. DeLuca? Town Council David DeLuca?
Yes, Mr. Moderator and members of the meeting, it has been reviewed, and it is a very standard, almost patterned proposal that's been put forward. These petitions do vary from town to town, but this language is passable, yes.
Okay, so we have a motion to refer for further. Sure.
Hi, Paul Burns, 32 Union Street. I don't understand every aspect of the motion to refer. If it were referred to a committee, is there a chance for it to, quote-unquote, die in committee, or will it be brought back to a town meeting and put on the warrant so that we would have an opportunity to actually vote for it in perhaps, I don't know, a cleaned-up version?
It is a legitimate question. Technically, the motion to refer would end any consideration by this town meeting, and there's no guarantee that it comes back. Even if it was referred to a committee, as often happens, sometimes referred to a committee appointed by the moderator, that's no guarantee that it comes back. It's a little bit more process that is applied to it, but there's no guarantee as to what goes back on the warrant. If the selectmen don't want to put it on, it would have to be, and no other committee has the jurisdiction to put it on, then it would come back, have to come back through petition.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so motion to refer for further study is on the floor. It is a majority vote. All those in favor of referring, taking this off the table and referring it for further study, the entire special act for recall petition, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Nay. You know what, I'd like to take account on this. Is Mr. Terrio still here and Mr. Garrity? I think we have to do this because now we're just in one area. Rob, if you could take all the rows from behind the camera, and Paul, all the rows even with and in front of the camera. So again, all those in favor of referring to for further study, put your hands up in the air and hold them up. $38. 26. Okay, put your hands down. All those opposed to referring, if you want to keep discussing this tonight, put your hands in the air and hold them up. $12. 18 for 30. So the motion to refer passes by a vote of 64 to 30. Now, in fairness to Mr. Chipman, I'm going to follow up on this. I have no direct authority. I'm sure I will talk to Jack, and we'll try and get an agenda item and see what happens for further consideration. I think this town meeting has spoken. They'd like to study it further, so I think we're going to try and honor that.
It's more than fair, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing it forward, Mr. Chipman. Okay, Article 13 is not motions. We hear reports under Article 13. We have three things to hear tonight briefly on. Ms. Jacobson, did you have a brief report on some affordable housing? Yes, sir. No. The motion to refer, it was not amending the motion, it was to refer. Ms. Jacobson.
Hi, Susan Jacobson. I'm the Affordable Housing Director. Just as an update, in the spring of 2017, the Norfolk Municipal Affordable Housing Trust worked with the housing with a housing consultant, Jen Goldson, and her team to prepare and update our housing production plan for state approval through the Department of Housing and Community Development. The plan was approved in the fall of 2017. In January of 2018, the town was able to apply for safe harbor. This is the first time we have been eligible to seek safe harbor. We had 16 units produced through two 40B projects. We were notified that the town plan was certified and that the town obtained safe harbor through December of 2018. The trust continues to look for local property for purchase, but the recent burst in home prices has slowed things down a bit. I have been approved by the state to manage 40B lotteries and have been hired as the lottery agent for the Meeting House Village condo development. The application period opened on March 19th for 5 two-bedroom units. The lottery winners will be selected on June 4th, 2018. The developer is being charged a fee for these services, and those funds are returned to the Norfolk Affordable Housing Trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Great work. Brief update on the public safety buildings. Is Mr. Cronin kicking around still? I don't mean it in that way, in the larger sense, George.
I know I'm getting old, but
I didn't, you were sitting up there, you know.
I know it.
Not that easy to get rid of.
All right. I'm George Cronin, 291 Main Street, Chairman of the Public Safety Building Committee. For those of you unfamiliar with the project, a few years ago the town purchased a building down on Sharon Ave, which is being renovated currently to become the police station of the town. And when that is done, the police will move out of the current facility, and then we will start renovating and putting an addition on the current facility, and that will become strictly the fire department. Also with the police department, we will house a regional communication center, which will provide revenue to the town, and it will provide for, I believe, 4 towns, including Norfolk. All right. As far as the fire station, that's pretty quick and simple, because we're really not, the only thing we've done is removed a lot of ledge. If you've gone by the fire station, that's with, currently we're planning on putting 3 large bays for equipment, fire equipment, and then we will renovate the existing building to house the firefighters and, you know, their equipment and training facilities and that type of deal. But that won't start until the police are moved out. Now, as far as the police station, I wish it was rosy, but it's not. We're very happy with the workmanship that's been done so far. I think the contractor is doing a good job, and he wants to give us a good facility, but that's good. On the minus side, we are not happy with the architect or our construction management firm. There's just been way too many oversights and omissions on the plans that have cost the town money that really it shouldn't have. And I want to thank the building commissioner, Bob Bullock, and particularly the facilities manager, Matt. They've done a tremendous job trying to straighten out some of these problems. However, because of these problems, we are currently, you know, there's no way to sugarcoat it. We're currently over budget, and we're a little behind schedule. Now, with the good weather coming, we may be able to catch up on some of the schedule, but as far as this over budget, I'm sure what's going to happen at the end of the project is we're going to request some reimbursement from the architect. We haven't discussed it at the, well, we have discussed it, but we haven't formally voted on it. We're going to wait till the end of the project because we have to get it done. And the more over budget we go over on this project, it's going to leave less money for the fire station. And we want both projects to serve the town and, you know, for what the needs we have. We're still waiting on estimates. The fire department plans are out to the estimators now, so the estimates should come back, they're expecting in July, so we'll have a better idea as to how things are going to proceed. Lately, the project's been going a little smoother, but, you know, we're going to get it done, and then we're going to have to make some hard decisions once this project gets done and we start work on the fire station. So that's the update.
Thank you, George. Representative Dooley, you're going to tantalize us with your brevity.
With my brevity. I'm Irish, I can't be that brief. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I just had the pleasure of having the Lieutenant Governor call me on the way home this afternoon to give me some information and invite us and the town to a ceremony on Monday. It's somewhat odd because she's like, you know, these are all embargoed. You cannot actually discuss it. And I'm like, well, we have our town meeting tonight. What can I say? And she goes, well, it's kind of my news to give, but you can tell that you've been invited to these particular things. I've never, ever been invited to one of these things where we did not actually get it. So the fact that she was calling me in the afternoon to invite us. And these are I have to give huge credit to Jack Hathaway and Mr. McCarthy, who put forth these grants into DHCD, Department of Housing and Community Development, and also into Mass Housing to get into these programs. They've done a ton of work. Nancy McDonald from Mass Housing called and said, you know, ours was by far the best package they received statewide. So what we actually received was, I shouldn't say what we received. What we're being invited to go to the State House to have the Lieutenant Governor announce is that of us becoming a housing choice community. So hopefully we get that. What that does is similar to, for those of us who were here in the fall town meeting, the Green Communities Grant. By being designated a housing choice community, it opens us up to a whole plethora of additional resources and grants. And we're one of the few, or in theory, we're one of the few communities that have been chosen for that. Mass Housing also had a $50,000 planning for production grant, which is being sent out to, I think, a dozen communities around the state. And we've been invited to the award ceremony for that, which is also on Monday. So hopefully really good news. We'll keep our fingers crossed. But I just wanted to call out Rich McCarthy and Jack Hathaway, who really did the lion's share on this. I was happy to carry the water up on the State House side and over at Mass Housing, but it's hopefully good things. But so whenever the Lieutenant Governor calls, it's usually a good thing, but I just wanted to share that as much as I could. So thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Dooley. Okay, moving on. Article 14, Mr. Fronczak. Town election bylaw.
I move to indefinitely postpone Article 14.
Do I have a second? Moved and seconded. Mr. Fronczak.
This was offered by our clerk in an effort to improve our voting outcomes by changing the date. However, other options were wanted to be explored by the clerk, so she's asked that this be withdrawn for now to give her time to do that.
Okay, so the motion is to indefinitely postpone it. Any questions or comments on that? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. That passes by the requisite majority. Article 15. Peg?
Mr. Moderator, I move to approve Article 15 as printed in the warrant with the exception of one change highlighted on the screen in red.
It's been moved and seconded. This is a zoning article. Peg, if you want to explain, or unless we want to have Mr. McCarthy come to the mic and say what's going on. Our planner, Mr. McCarthy, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Richard McCarthy, Town Planner. The proposed change for the bylaw is to add a provision to have payment in lieu for affordable units. As Susan mentioned earlier, the town had a housing production plan done, and one of the considerations that was advised to the town to add is payment in lieu. So right now, when there's a development of 10 or more units, you have to have an affordable unit either within the development or off-site. The recommendation was to add a third option, which is a payment in lieu. And what would happen is if that was chosen, and it has to be approved by the planning board, the applicant would provide a cash payment to the Affordable Housing Trust, which in turn could either purchase land, produce units, buy units, so it would be for the town to use for affordable housing. So it's, the provision is to add that to a new option. So it'll be 1, 2, and 3. So either on-site affordable units, off-site affordable units, or payment in lieu, or a combination of those. The friendly amendment change is just to clarify that it is funds to the Norfolk Affordable Housing Trust Fund. The original language was looked at as confusing if it was not one of the options. It was more directive to that particular option. So that's what the amendment, the friendly amendment is for that section of the bylaw. Do you want me to go through all the changes for that, or just that?
Well, if you could describe what else is happening in the bylaw while I have you up at the mic.
Okay. The first provision, actually ahead of that one, is in the affordable housing bylaw. It directs applicants, if they're producing 10 or more units of residential housing, they have to provide affordable housing. The thing it does not say currently is when do you apply. So what the amendment to the bylaw is going to do is going to direct an applicant to either file simultaneously when they do a development project, or, as in recently the planning board has just done, have to be done within 90 days of approval. So that way it's more tied to the development. But presently it's a little bit more open, and we want to try to nail that down, because I think it'll work better for the board as they're evaluating the project going forward. The last change to this. The last change is the timing of when the affordable units will be provided. And again, that would be applicable to either if it was on-site, off-site, or a payment in lieu. Right now, the way the present table is in the bylaw, it's subject to interpretation, negotiation, et cetera. And what we want to ensure is that when affordable units are required, that they're provided to the town in a timely manner, which then get counted towards our overall affordable housing numbers, and they're done before you go to the next increment of 10. So it's one affordable unit for every 10 units of housing. This, as you can see in the table in the right column, it'll show you based on the number of housing units that are on the left column. The original bylaw was based off a model bylaw, but it was really scaled more towards the larger scale developments. This one here, we kind of customized the table so it goes all the way down from 10 units all the way up. Hopefully we don't get over 110 units, but at least it's scaled appropriately for providing affordable units. And those are the changes to the bylaw. The planning board did recommend those changes at their public hearing, and they also did recommend the friendly amendments, friendly amendment.
Thank you. Any questions, discussions on this bylaw? Mr. Terrio.
Paul Terrio, 57 Rockwood Road. As a member of the CPC, I was curious if somebody could explain the rate or calculation that's established in the payment in lieu. For instance, with a high-end development, the houses are $800,000 to $900,000. On a low-end development, the houses are $400,000 or more.
Mr. McCarthy, if you could help out with that.
That's not, yeah, well, sure. For the purpose, I was just going to read from what it is. It's based off the median single-family home sales prices in Norfolk for the most recent calendar year as determined by the SPGA. So I think one of the things the board will have to take into consideration is what that median sales price would be in relation to the development. So for example, if it's a median home sale price of 400,000, but they're looking at a potential development that's up at 900,000, then we need to make sure we're comparing apples to apples as far as the pricing goes for the payment in lieu that would be. So for example, again, if it's, a $600,000 house, you do the math to back out what the difference is. If it's 900 accordingly, so we'll provide the same rate of compensation payment in lieu that they would have to do for the unit if it was on-site or off-site.
Mr. Terrio, follow-up?
I'm just curious, what sort of oversights are in place to safeguard that the appropriate rates are collected and presented to the town?
Mr. McCarthy.
Sure. How I would kind of envision is just the way we had recently worked on a project before the planning board, be working in consultation with Susan as the affordable housing director and discuss whether, number one, if it makes sense to do it, and then what the price is, because again, it is an option to a developer. However, it's the planning board through the special permit granting authority. At the end of the day, they would have to approve it. So we would work collectively to do that. For example, we had development, they were giving consideration, they want to do the affordable units off-site, and discussing internally, it was decided that it would make sense that they be provided within the development itself. So that was the decision. So again, it's got to be worked with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, whether these things are going to make sense or not to do. And it may, it's an option. So we're going to have to check and balance it ourselves.
Thank you. Comments, additional comments, questions? Ms. Pine? No, hold on one
Oh,
sec.
I'm sorry, I didn't
Yeah.
see you, sorry.
Betsy?
I'm Betsy Pine. I live on 187 Seekonk Street. I can understand that it's easier for the developer to just be able to pay a certain amount of money to address his obligation to have one affordable house. But why are we doing that? Wouldn't it be better for the developer to build the affordable house in his development, and then the affordable houses get built, and it's not up to the housing authority to build the house? I thought it was difficult for them to build brand-new houses from scratch. And I'd just like someone to explain to me why we are doing it this way and not requiring them to build it within their development.
I think that is well, what I've heard in the past is a pretty common critique of this. Mr. McCarthy, if you have it, I don't want to have a lot of back and forth though. So.
No, I was just going to actually defer to Sue. I think she'd probably be better able to give you a good explanation because she was involved. Being newer to here, not involved in that planning production process.
So part of it, Betsy, was the housing production plan consultant. This was one of the things that they recommended that we put in our housing production plan, and that we make this something that we take into consideration on a case-by-case basis. But if you look at some developments, say larger developments where the homes are 3,000 to 4,000 square feet, from the outside, the affordables have to look exactly the same, and putting an affordable buyer or family in a home that's 3,000 to 4,000 square feet is really not setting them up to succeed. So it's an option. We would maybe not build them ourselves necessarily, because that can be more difficult, but look to find a new home or something maybe a couple of years old. It just gives us another option to potentially help out an affordable buyer that, again, doesn't, although the $800,000 neighborhoods are beautiful, you have to maintain and heat and all of the things that go along with that.
Thank you. Quick follow-up, Betsy?
So are you saying that the house has to look exactly the same?
From the outside.
If it's within the development generally. Question, comment?
I have a question sort of on the same thing. With this addition, how are we going to vote on this? Is this going to be two votes, the one on the
No,
the
it's,
contribution, or are we voting on the whole thing as one? So I would like to recommend that we vote on the two pieces separately.
I think they're two tied together to vote on separately. I don't think that would be an appropriate motion to divide. I think they're two linked up. It is one amendment to a few different sections of the bylaw. Question, comment?
So if the house has to look exactly the same...
Could we get your name?
Yes, Peggy Bedard, 28 Lawrence Street.
Thank you, Peggy.
So if the house has to look exactly the same from the outside, why can't it be subdivided into townhouses or apartments from the inside?
I will tell you just anecdotally that does happen occasionally. It's sometimes difficult to do within a development. Here's what I will say, and I think Rich could back me up on this, is there's a lot of leeway and a lot of room to negotiate these things during the permitting context to get the most bang for your buck from the affordability perspective. I personally, as an attorney who represents town, have negotiated exactly what you suggested. Big house divided into two.
It seems to keep things more fair.
They have a lot of tools in the toolbox, and I think that's what Sue and Mr. McCarthy have been suggesting. Okay, this takes a 2/3 vote. It is a zoning article. This is a number of amendments to our affordable housing zoning bylaw. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? I think I'm going to declare that passing by the 2/3 required majority. Okay, Article 16, also a zoning amendment. Mr. Hurwitz.
Mr. Moderator, I move to approve Article 16 as printed in the warrant.
Mr. Hurwitz.
All right, this is a relatively straightforward zoning change. Presently, in the definition of this zoning component, exercise and aerobic studio is an allowable usage, but there isn't anything defining what that means. So this zoning change just enters a specific definition for what exercise and aerobic studio means in that context, which is shown on screen. And from the advisory board perspective, right, as commercial enterprises grow, Norfolk wants to help ensure success. So if there are businesses that like to offer these types of services, so exercise, aerobics, meditation, nutrition, massage as accessory uses of the business within an established business district, it's something we'd like to support.
Thank you. I assume the planning board recommends.
Yes, they did.
Great. Any comments, questions about the definition presented? Seeing none, this is zoning. It requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. It passes unanimously. Article 17, zoning. I believe it's a ban on marijuana.
Mr. Moderator, I move to approve Article 17 as printed in the warrant.
Mr. Fronczak.
At our last town meeting, we voted in a bylaw that prohibits marijuana-related commercial businesses and
A
activities.
general bylaw.
Correct, a general bylaw, and now town council has recommended strongly that in order to make this have the proper effect, we should have a companion zoning bylaw.
So if everyone recalls, in the fall, we passed a general bylaw that banned recreational marijuana. This is just an analogous zoning bylaw. Any questions or comments on this? Seeing none, this requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. It passes by the requisite 2/3. Article 18, zoning regarding some used cars. Mr. Fronczak.
Mr. Moderator, I move to approve Article 18 as printed in the warrant.
Mr. Fronczak.
Okay, if you look at the language as it appears on the screen, we're adding "and preparation." The intention of this is to expand the zoning in this area to include a type of business that didn't exist when this was written. So like when I'm going down Route 1, the auto mile, and you see all those cars for sale, some people don't do it that way. Some people go to websites, they buy a car online, but you have to have some kind of local, I don't know what you call it, like an assembly point where they then deliver the vehicles once I've bought it. That's what this is accommodating. There is a particular web-based car sales firm that has approached the town, which would love to have a holding and a delivery area within this particular area. Now, it's not going to be on display, so it's not going to look like Route 1, but this would, and it's recommended that we pass this, accommodate not just this one business, but also open it up to this type of business, which seems to be more prevalent.
Thank you, Mr. Fronczak. Planning Board recommends?
They did.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, this also requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. It passes by the requisite 2/3. Article 19, Charter Study Committee. Mr. Sneed.
Mr. Moderator, I move to approve Article 19 as printed in the warrant.
Mr. Sneed.
Periodically, towns tend to review their operational structure, committees, and so forth. Mr. Hathaway has informed me that this was last done in Norfolk about year 2000, 2002, thereabouts, and apparently it's been done fairly recently in some neighboring towns. So the suggestion is that we form a committee in the town of Norfolk for the purpose of reviewing town government. Do we have all the committees we need? Do we need all the committees we have? Are there offices that should be elected that are not, or vice versa, and so forth? Generally, this is going to be a fairly lengthy process because it will look at all aspects of town government. So you can figure that it would be a 1 to 2 year process and would look at all aspects of town government and subsequently make recommendations for any changes that might come out of it. And that, I think, is pretty much the scope of that.
And I might add, even though this would direct the selectmen to have the authority to appoint this committee, the selectmen can appoint this committee anyway, and I think they've brought this forward to get a sense of the town meeting as to whether or not the town meeting is in favor of the appointment of the committee. But they have the independent authority under statute to appoint committees like this and anytime they like. Mr. Rosenberg.
Thank you. If this were to pass, the Board of Selectmen would be directed to appoint this committee. I am hoping the Board of Selectmen or some members of the board can share with me their intentions with respect to the size of the committee that would be appointed, the number of members.
If the selectmen have had any discussions like that, otherwise I imagine they would take that up at a impending selectmen's meeting. Jack, has there been any discussion?
We have not had any discussions. My recommendation would be to them would be just to talk to Rentham, who just went through this, and kind of figure out the logistics of what was good and what was bad.
Thank you, Jack. Any other questions, comments on the appointment of this committee? Seeing none. All those in favor of the creation of the committee say aye. Aye. All those opposed? It passes by the requisite majority. Article 20.
Mr. Moderator, I move to approve Article 20 as printed in the warrant. So this
Mr. Fronczak.
So this routine motion, it focuses on the town's 13 existing revolving funds, which are used to receive various types of revenue, and is a standard motion.
So I believe this is two new revolving funds, and the next one might be the establishing limits.
Oh, I'm
or
sorry, I
creating-
jumped ahead, thank
Right.
you. To create two new revolving funds that will be used to fund the advertising needed to conduct hearings for the ZBA and the planning board. So it looks like we're going for 15 total.
So for town meetings benefit, revolving funds are an accounting device that allows money to come in to a specific department from sources, application fees, what have you, and then go out without further appropriation at a town meeting, so that there could be a flow of business. And you'll see in the next article that we have quite a few already, and this would be a few more. Any questions or comments on Article 22 new revolving funds, one for zoning board, one for planning board? Seeing none, all those in favor of the creation of these two new revolving funds say aye. All those opposed? It passes unanimously. Article 21, Mr. Sneed.
Mr. Moderator, I move to approve Article 21 as printed in the warrant with the exception of the 5 changes highlighted on the screen in red.
They're actually on two different screens, so we're deleting these two funds, 2113 and 2114. We didn't approve them last year, we don't want to approve them again. And then 3 limits. The parking tickets, we erroneously wrote $1,000, it should be $3,000 just like last year. Offsite improvements, we wrote $91,000, it should be $100,000. And police vehicle details, that is $50,000, that should be $60,000. That is fees that somebody pays for us to have a police car at a detail.
So yes, and for those who may not be familiar with these revolving accounts, many of the committees that operate in this town collect fees for various reasons, and they have expenses for various reasons. So it's money in and out kind of thing. Subject to a limit, you can't accumulate $500,000 in a fund. That's what all these various limits are all about. And they enable these committees to do their daily business without having to budget them in the town process. They got a $73 expense and they got $120 come in from this contractor. It doesn't have to be dealt with in town meeting. It gets dealt with through these revolving funds. And that's why we have so many of them, because there's so many committees and they have so many functions like this that they're performing.
Any further questions on the establishment of these limits for the revolving funds and some other changes? Mr. Garrity.
Mr. Moderator, thank you. Rob Garrity, 123 Boardman Street. Some of these are rather large, and I wonder what the thought is behind when these revolvers become budgets that we should look at in more detail. For instance, like the wastewater treatment fund is essentially, or some of the water stuff, that's a revolving fund, essentially. It collects revenue and spends revenue, but we see detail on it. We don't see detail on some of these, and you know, $100,000 is $300 a day. So it's $300 a day without any sort of further budgetary oversight. Is there a thought, Mr. Moderator, about when these revolvers become large enough to do a little more work on?
Well, I mean, those are enterprise funds,
They are
those other
enterprise,
ones.
this
They're
is
not
true.
quite the same. There is a cap on our total amount that we're allowed to do for revolving funds. Your question, however, is when some of them get large, they might form some different part of a budget. I don't know if you have a comment on that, Jack, or not?
I think Todd and I have talked and
I think
included some others about that recreation fund, that would be a good candidate for I think you'll see that at some point in the near future, that becoming an enterprise fund. The offsite improvements for the planning board is a tough one, because that's one where the planning board might have a developer contribute $70,000 for sidewalks. So it's that really doesn't fit into the enterprise fund world. But I think, if I guess, you're probably hinting at towards the recreation, and I think we'll turn that into an enterprise fund in the near future.
Thank you, Mr. Garrity. Seeing no further questions or comments, all those in favor of the motion under Article 21, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Passes unanimously. Article 22. Community Preservation Act administrative fees. Mr. Tomaszewski.
I move that this be approved. I'm sorry. I move to approve the Article 22 as printed in the warrant. I move to approve Article 22 as printed in the warrant.
So it's a motion to approve as printed in the warrant. We're just getting a fresh microphone for you, Jim.
Thank you. This is a standard article each year, and what this does is take some of the monies in the Community Preservation Fund, $20,000, which they use for their administrative expenses, like appraisals and some of the other costs. It's a standard article which we bring every year.
So again, the Community Preservation Act provides that there are certain surcharges on taxes that we can spend on open space and historical and affordable housing, and the fund, we're allowed to set aside some of that money for administrative funds. That's what this article is, and it is an annual one. Any questions on Article 22? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Passes unanimously. Article 23, annual allocations under the Community Preservation Act. Mr. Tomaszewski.
I move to approve Article 23 as printed in the warrant. Again, this is a standard article that we do each year that allocates various portions of the Community Preservation Fund to various purposes. And the three big ones are 10% minimum mandated for the future operation of open space creations, acquisition and preservation, and 10% for the Community Preservation Fund for the future appropriation of affordable housing. And the last one is 10% of the community preservation for historical resources.
Any questions, comments on Article 23? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes unanimously. Article 24, our Chapter 90 road repair funds. Ms. Terrio.
Mr. Moderator, I move to approve Article 24 as printed in the warrant.
Ms. Terrio.
This Article 24 is a standard article that allows the Board of Selectmen to utilize Chapter 90 funds from the state for the purposes of improving public roads.
Thank you. And I'm saddened that Thomas isn't here to quiz Mr. McGee on exactly what he's going to accomplish with these funds. Any questions, comments on our Chapter 90 funds? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? It passes unanimously. Article 25, grants. Ms. Terrio.
Mr. Moderator, I move to approve Article 25 as printed in the warrant.
Ms. Terrio.
Article 25 is another standard article that authorizes the selectmen to accept grants on behalf of the town.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Mr. Rosenberg.
Are there any grants that are currently pending or under consideration that the that it is suspected will come up within this period?
Mr. Hathaway.
Apparently, according to the Lieutenant Governor, yes. But I can't talk about that, exactly.
Anything other than that, though?
None pending that I'm aware of. We typically get a lot of grants throughout the year. The public safety folks do a great job of applying for grants. Library applies for grants. Todd has applied for a couple of community compact grants. So, yeah, the schools, absolutely.
Okay, seeing no further comments, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? It passes unanimously. Article 26, easements. Ms. Terrio.
Mr. Moderator, I move to approve Article 26 as printed in the warrant.
Ms. Terrio.
This is another standard article that authorizes the Board of Selectmen to conduct business as noted in the wording of subject matter in this article. And if I might defer to Mr. Hathaway's comments, he could elaborate.
Elaboration, please.
All right, I was thinking about the next one. Really for laying out the roads and getting the easements necessary around acquiring those roads. We're not asking for an appropriation. I know there's language in there to do that. We are not asking for appropriation at this time. So to use the term a couple times, it's a standard article to allows us to construct roads in the future.
Mr. Rosenberg.
Again, I have the question of whether there is anything specific sort of on the horizon, planning horizon.
Subdivisions within the planning board, you know, as they get developed, so that they're all at different stages, so I don't think there's anything imminent, but certainly there are discussions for future public ways that are before the planning board and other land use boards.
David, for your benefit too, if there was a specific roadway that was going to be accepted as a public way, that would be specifically before this, before town meeting. So that's not what this is for. This is for the kind of ancillary easements, drainage and otherwise. But if there was a specific roadway to be taken public, you'd get official notice here, and it'd be identified here by a vote of town meeting.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Seeing no further comment, all those in favor of Article 26, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. It passes unanimously. Article 27, Ms. Terrio, sale of surplus equipment.
Mr. Moderator, I move to approve Article 27 as printed in the warrant.
Ms. Terrio.
Article 27 is another standard article that authorizes selectmen to sell surplus property such as furniture or vehicles. This article does not authorize them to sell real estate.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Passes unanimously. Article 28, rescission of debt. Ms. Driscoll.
I move to approve Article 28 as printed in the warrant.
Ms. Driscoll.
I'm filling in for Mr. Beachkowski. So if somebody else would like to speak to this, that would be great.
I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Mr. Hathaway? Yep.
We have some, these next three articles are all the same. They're authorizations that we've received in the past to borrow money for specific projects. Those projects were either canceled or in most cases, we were able to perform the function under budget, so we're asking that the town rescind the authority to borrow that money in the future. It's kind of like your credit card, so now we're eliminating credit card, our credit limit in the future.
And this one related to borrowing, related to school feasibility study, Jack, I believe? Jack? This one related to the school feasibility study borrowing?
This is right there, yes.
Yep.
Sorry. My bad.
Way to be on top of it, Jack.
It's getting late. I'm sorry.
We're getting there. Just answer the questions. We'll get right there. All those in favor of this rescission of debt signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. I think that passes with the requisite majority. Article 29, more rescission of debt. Peg?
Mr. Moderator, I move to approve Article 29 as printed in the warrant.
And this relates to borrowing for public safety building design, correct?
$145,000.
Excellent. Any further questions, comments on Article 29? Seeing none. Walter? Mr. Byron? Take your time.
We had Walter Byron, 80 Fruit Street, we had a report from the building committee a little while ago that they were running over budget on the public safety buildings and might come up short in terms of their funds available to finish the fire department expansion. So why are we cutting this off? If we really need to finish that fire department expansion, we might need to go and borrow some more money to do that.
This is, I believe this relates just to design, so we would have to repurpose that debt. My understanding is we're not quite at that point yet. However, I believe you'd say that this now frees up some borrowing for potential.
It would, absolutely. And this was specifically for a public safety building on Main Street. We're no longer building a public safety building on Main Street, so we would have to use this money, we'd have to vote to repurpose it. We might as well just, if we are going to borrow more money, we might as well just have a vote to borrow more money rather than repurpose.
Seeing no further questions or comments, all those in favor of this rescission of debt signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. It passes unanimously. Article 30, more rescission of debt. Peg?
Mr. Moderator, I move to approve Article 30 as printed in the warrant.
And this was, I believe, some borrowing for a solar electric generating facility?
Yes, $500,000.
Any questions, comments on this? Seeing none, all those in favor of this rescission of debt signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. It passes by the requisite majority. I have a motion to dissolve town meeting. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you very much for coming.